Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Master Duel. Let's hop in. Apparently Hearthstone has got a newer pay-to-win setup, or no, it's not pay-to-win, but it's like custom signature cards that you would have to pay through the nose to actually get. Which I guess is better than pay to win, is to just try and go whale hunting and get as many people to spend as much money on Hearthstone. There is definitely some argument to be made that any change released might be in reaction to Marvel Snap, but also I imagine signature cards as a concept would have had to have been in the works a little bit longer than the point at which Activision Blizzard would have seen what Marvel Snap was doing and would have been able to react to that. The next update almost certainly would be more reactionary to Marvel Snap. And yeah, people are still certainly saying they kind of are really liking Marvel Snap when I'm not really seeing it. Like, I'm still playing it. But I really am at this point in the first week or so of it being out, only playing it when there's daily quests, and really there isn't much of a reason to even do that. One thing I can say that I like around it is that eventually playing the game you will seemingly unlock everything, so you don't it doesn't seem like you really have to pay the season passes or battle passes to that you'll eventually just get the Miles Morales cards for Spider-Man anyways. It may take years and they may constantly add more content to make it close to impossible. It may take grinding, although I don't know if you really are grinding anything even in Marvel Snap. Once you have the daily quests done, I don't think you can get any of the credits currency at all, because you don't win credits currencies when winning a game. Yeah, that's definitely the case, and that's almost certainly why I've already gotten down to the point that as soon as there aren't enough overlapping daily quests, I just stop playing. Now that's fairly true for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel also, is that once you have the daily quest, there's considerably less reason to continue playing, but there is at least a reason, because there is an actual rank system that actually does matter, or at least it feels like it matters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, where Marvel Snap, not so much. I've just been teetering between level 38 and level 40 in the rank system, and they've not said anything about any kind of season ending or rank rewards for being at a certain level, or the number resetting or anything else. It feels very much like there's just a single rank system where me being in rank 40 just means I'm in rank 40, and if I got to rank 1, I don't know if there's any difference to that other than a number. And inherently, I think that's the problem with Marvel Snap overall, is that what they're offering to you is fairly cheap, as far as, hey, we'll give you these 8-bit variants of skins of cards, and we'll let you upgrade the cards so that it has an animated frame or a shiny logo, or it has live 2D instead of static imagery, or the image is zoomed in a little bit more so it goes outside the frame of a card. Like that's all just bad cosmetic changes, and their whole game is around that. Now I guess it is worth mentioning that NetEase, the, I believe, Chinese company, unless I'm really mistaken, funded this Marvel Snap game, so maybe this is what a game looks like when a Chinese company funds it, because they want to maybe have it sell better in Asian countries. And certainly, if you look at Marvel Snap from that idea, there's very little text. There's not a ridiculous amount of complication there. So it is possible that Second Dinner made this game just for a paycheck and got the Marvel license through NetEase. Otherwise, it would have been a game without the Marvel license. And Second Dinner's real passion project has yet to be seen. Suppose those are all possibilities. But then, at a certain point, you could always say, oh, well, this is not really what Ben Brode was actually working on, and the real Hearthstone competitor is the next project that Second Dinner is making. You could certainly try and make that argument. But I don't know if you really should buy into that kind of argument, because that's a fairly ridiculous thing to try and say. We kind of jumped into the accountability section today without even labeling it, which maybe that's an interesting new way to do things. But yeah, I've still been playing Darkest Dungeon, and I'm making progress on Darkest Dungeon, but I am not really at the point where I would say I am enjoying the speed of the progress that I'm playing Darkest Dungeon. There's a lot of me just going quiet. There's a lot of me kind of going in autopilot mentally. That is just increasingly happening. And so, like, I am definitely in a danger where I'm going to get my team leveled up to level 6, a team of 4, and just send them to take on the Darkest Dungeon and hope that that works. And if I fail there, I might very well just stop playing at that point. Because, yeah, I'm not really seeing a lot. I did find and realize that there are special missions for special bosses, sub-bosses, throughout the selection of missions, and I haven't been particularly focusing on those. So I've defeated maybe 2 or 3 of about 30 bosses, and there are 4 locations that I think have 3 bosses each, so it probably is closer to 12 bosses, or 12 sub-bosses, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like 30, but the actual calculation really seems to imply that there'd only be about 12 of them. And I think those are probably one-time missions. Maybe there's some replayability in that, maybe not. But everything else in the game definitely just feels like there is more complication as a game that was just in early access far too long. I really think Darkest Dungeon would have been a better game had it released itself out of early access and not added any of its DLC character concepts, and instead introduced all of its DLC in the Darkest Dungeon 2. Because the things that would really add to Darkest Dungeon that aren't happening in the DLC would be new arrangements of enemies, because that really doesn't work particularly well. You often see the exact same group of 4 enemies because it's not randomized. New backgrounds, new locations, new story. If characters were not just generic hero classes, but if there were characters that had more of a specific focus. Like, I really could see making a Darkest Dungeon 2 that played completely differently from the turn-based experience. It really needs an auto mode. If Darkest Dungeon was like Destiny Child, for instance, and had just an auto mode, I would probably experience it a lot better that way. Speaking of Destiny Child, which I don't have too much to say about that game, but Shift Up's other company, Nikkei, is out, and I got maybe through the first chapter and have not made any more progress. I probably will give it a little bit more time, but I am thoroughly unimpressed with it. It is visually, it looks like an Arcanite's clone. With the subtitling in English, it sounds horrible. Like, the characters don't feel like they match the voice. The personalities of the first 3 characters you interact with are seemingly just trying to do the exact same thing that the 3 succubuses in Destiny Child, like Mona, Davy, and I don't even remember the name of the other one. But there's basically a yellow, red, and blue character in Project Nikkei, and they all look the same. The real thing here is the gameplay, and eventually you'll unlock an auto mode in the gameplay of Nikkei, and then I would just never play the main thing that they really, I think, did put a lot of effort into, because you're dragging your finger around, and that's aiming a gun, and that's shooting enemies. Now, the idea of anime 3D or semi 3D, live 2D anime girls shooting guns, the visuals of that when you're actually playing is way worse than the visuals of that if you're just watching someone else play, because you have to actually be targeting at the enemies in the background, so your focus is always targeting in the background, and you're not seeing the thighs or the buttocks or the skirts being slightly lifted up of the anime waifus as they're shooting. And that was really the only selling point. And because that's really the only selling point, that leads to almost all of the characters in Project Nikkei, and these Nikkeis are basically, for lack of a better description, they seem like they are modified sex robots that have now been enlisted into being used as monster slayers. They don't even fight each other. They fight a generic robots called Raptures, which that's a mistake too. But yeah, it leads to them all looking pretty much the exact same in body types. There was a couple of like more niche characters out there as far as bust sizes, but generally it is, let's get D's or higher, D's, double D's, G's as far as their cleavage sizes. Let's put them in a lot of armor and military clothing that covers up most of their skin, so you're not going to see much. A significant number of characters have helmets on, so they're not even bothering to animate the faces. Maybe slowly over time they would have their animators draw faces for those characters, and maybe the helmets would come off in different skins. But when you have what feels like nearly 2/3 of your characters not showing their face, there's definitely a problem there. None of the characters really come off as interesting. None of the story comes off as interesting. And spoiler for the first chapter, the first character that you're supposed to really fall in love with and be really happy with, you barely spend an hour with this character, and as far as actual dialogue, you probably only spend uh, maybe 100 words at most with this character. So there's just like no relationship there. And then at the end of that first chapter, they straight up tell you have to shoot, you as the human commander have to shoot this Nikkei robot because it's corrupted. And the implication there is that he did shoot him. And I guess the implication there is that that character will come back in a new body some other time. Or he didn't shoot her and just left her and then she'd come back. But the whole system is ridiculous. That it's just like far too early to introduce that big of a twist. That's something you do at the end of an entire storyline, probably a year's worth of storyline, to really get to know a character. Compare that to the story of Destiny Child, and if this is really the same writers of Destiny Child, they've gotten way worse, or they're just not really trying. And in a lot of ways, it feels like they either got lucky with Destiny Child because Project Nikkei is way worse, or this Shift Up division, this new group of people under Shift Up, may all be just a whole new team. And that's the problem of attributing, certainly, the quality of games to a company when the quality of games really are the people, and if not the circumstances also in the time frame. But yeah, conceptually the concept is dumb. Destiny Child is such a great idea because it's immediately saying, this is magic. I can magically create any anime waifu to look like anything I want. If I want to make an anime waifu who is really realistic and is just a big busted lady in a wedding dress, I can do that, and there's really no question, because the general conceit there is that the creations of a human's wish and a demon are these magical creatures that can look any way you want them to, and they don't have any shame. If anything, the more comfortable they are in their skin, the less clothing they're wearing. On top of that, you can also just have a character that is a total demon and a total monster, and there's no questioning that. You can have gun characters for the gun fetish people, and there's plenty of characters that do have guns, rocket launchers in Destiny Child. So I feel like that the idea of Project Nikkei being only gun girls really doesn't make a lot of sense. You could take every good character design in Project Nikkei, of which I imagine there's quite far fewer than you would think, and bring them in as a child in Destiny Child, and that would work. It really isn't until they changed artists nearly 3 seasons, probably closer to 5 years into Destiny Child, only at that point do you see a major defeat where characters actually start to look like they're dead, but even in that they're not really dead. So like the main 3 support characters, succubuses in Destiny Child, after about 3 years are in comas and replaced with 3 new characters when the new artist came in, which I don't really like that, but there is still a lot of teasing and a lot of hope to bring them back, and the entire storyline as it is now is around the hope and desire to bring them back. So it just emphasizes the love of those characters, whereas you would have to really be a sucker in Project Nikkei to really complain or want to bring back the character you just met. I tried to look all over the menu as far as Project Nikkei, and really not seeing a lot there. Just your standard gacha game elements that you would expect, but perhaps not as much generosity quite at the start here as you would expect from Shift Up. Like, I didn't log into the game and then immediately get 100 free pulls or 1,000 free pulls or any big number. I got 10 free pulls as part of the tutorial, and that was it. But also, even by the time I did have those free pulls, as far as characters, I kind of didn't have any desire to play. I lost the desire to play the game fairly quickly. They have this little chibi 3D map you wander around, and you can find some small amount of collectibles in the overworld map when you're doing a chapter, but that doesn't really add much. It isn't a 100% copy of Arknights, I will say that. Arknights is more of a tower defense game, and this is much more of a... I guess dungeon crawler might be the best description. Well, I am not getting anywhere with this. But he's not getting anywhere with this either. But yeah, they were slow to release it and launch it also. I got an email telling me, oh yeah, you pre-registered for this nearly a day after I was able to install and log in, and they're having crashing features, and that's exactly how I ended playing, is that I got into a section, and in that section it stopped loading the next section. So it soft locked, it didn't hard lock really, but even for an Android phone game to soft lock is a pretty poor programmed experience. And that makes me really concerned, talking way too much about Project Nikkei here. I really had hoped that it would have been like the beginning of something new, and then it could have been something I could have gotten into. Because if you told me this was going to be very much like Destiny Child, but you get to be in on Destiny Child on day one, that would have been really a nice idea, but it just isn't. It could be in the future, but there would have to be a lot of rough patches happening first. Right, give me this. Let's see. Is there anything else to talk about as far as the accountability section? Well, I'm still trying to wrap up everything on my guest Wi-Fi router, and I'll just quickly say I had not really thought about the fact that I'm installing Borg Backup, which both acts as a server and as a client. And I really hadn't set up any way for somebody with like a MacBook to back up to the Raspberry Pi itself, so I needed to set something up there, and I need to test that out, and I'm still just working on writing the what can only be described as fairly exhaustive instructions. But that's kind of all that's left to do on it. Is we're still just like, I'm still just trying to polish it up as good as possible and get to work. Now the Borg backup setup effectively is making a SSH connection, a fairly insecure SSH connection via password, but I'm hoping that it is done in such a way that only certain folders can be accessed, but trying to do what you normally would do, which would be this ch root, change the root into that specific folder, that's harder to do. I'd have to figure out a lot more. Alright, well, I'm screwed now. I don't know what canceled this ability, but maybe it was this when it destroyed the other copy of that. So, yeah. That there is very much a possibility that if I was to try and sandbox the Borg backup locations a little bit better, it probably would be a little bit more secure. But it's way more important, I would say, to have the ability to actually use a network attached storage as a location to push backups. Otherwise, using the Borg backup system instead of just pushing files individually, which really isn't a backup. And I guess inherently I could very possibly continuously add more and more content and more features, and at a certain level the Raspberry Pi is gonna run out of processing power and RAM. Let's see. Let's see, do I have anything else to talk about? We started really late today. This whole Christmas season is, and it's ridiculous to talk about Christmas season, but like Amazon Prime Day, Black Friday, early access of another Amazon Prime Day, Black Friday, Christmas, it's particularly, I think, this year just been exhausting already, and we really haven't even started it. I think financially people are struggling everywhere, and that's part of the problem. But yeah, I've not been enthralled with it, and over the past couple of weeks, separately, I think the seasonal affective disorder may be kicking in fairly early. And so there is a danger of a rough winter as far as just not being particularly happy. I think playing Darkest Dungeon also works that way. There was a meme on Reddit where it's just like the crying face, and it's like, why don't I like video games anymore? And I'm not quite at that point, but I definitely am not having the most amount of fun with Darkest Dungeon. And in general, I think I probably am not as good as I may have once been at escapism and the escapism experience you can have playing video games. And that doesn't make good content, certainly, is if I'm going quiet because I'm thinking of something else that's just making me sad, for lack of a better word, while playing a video game. Like, I'm probably just getting worse and worse about tuning out people and tuning out things. none of those things I really want to discuss or would discuss on a public YouTube page or a YouTube channel. I was hoping he would summon enough of these so I could trigger this. Well, this might work. This might work or this might not work. See, it's weird that this is kind of like a Harpy Lady deck. Do we have enough? Potentially we actually don't. What I'd like to do probably is play something like Binding of Isaac and get into that. Well, that would kill me. This would probably kill me too, but we'll see. Just do this. Get rid of those. That is a problem, I will say, that it's just growing more and more as you get older and older. As I get older and older, I'll just say from my personal experience, it does seem like it's harder and harder to recapture the fun of things. At a certain level, I have a whole bunch of DVDs, and that's not even like counting probably 500 anime DVDs that I'd like to go back and watch one last time before I die of old age. But like, at no point do I really have the actual desire to go back and watch any of that. I am watching a lot of new stuff on Netflix. I saw some more episodes of that Cabinet of Curiosities anthology series that's kind of like Twilight Zone. It's up and down. The good news though is that it does definitely have better episodes, but then there are also episodes where I was really just listening to the audio in the background and not even paying any attention to it, which is really doing it a disservice because you need to be able to see the visuals. And if you're not seeing the visuals and the effects, then you are going to really screw yourself out of any possibility. See, yeah, this is where Marvel Snap falls apart, is that I just got 200 gems for getting up rank, and for playing I got 2 legacy packs and a normal card that I'm sure nobody really cares about, but it's at least something. Whereas the closest thing you get for winning a game in Marvel Snap is that you'll get a duplicate booster of a normal card or card. They really don't have rarities in their cards, which is weird too. But yeah, I spent a lot more time playing that one game, certainly, but I was rewarded appropriately, or at least somewhat. I know there was other stuff I watched, but it is once again just boiling down to I cannot remember what I watched at all. So it must have not been that important. Yeah. I'm watching a lot of like The Floor is Lava Season 3, which it's incrementally getting better and better. They almost certainly need to force all the contestants to wear like helmets and do a double dare type experience. Maybe not even helmets so much as they need to be wearing knee pads. Because jumping around and landing on somewhat cushioned platforms or the edges of somewhat cushioned platforms is still going to end up with somebody hurting themselves pretty badly. And almost certainly that is going to happen if it hasn't already happened. And I still think that the gimmick of jumping around and playing the floor is lava needs some work. It could be very much a case that there just needs to be a question and answer period around it to stretch it out. Like, I don't know what questions you would have there, though. Like, it would be kind of redundant to have them all answer questions as far as lava or geography, things like that. You could do that, certainly, but I don't know if that's the right move. It could be a case that if the competing teams each designed a room for themselves, and then all three of the teams, with the help of like designers, had to compete in each of those teams, that would make a lot of sense. It's a weird thing, certainly, because in Netflix's case, they really need several of these like game shows to happen every single day. They need their Price is Right, let's make a deal type shows, even if they're not really giving away significant rewards. They need those to be kind of like, hey, this is a thing where we're gonna give you a new episode 250 days out of the year. So just like every weekday, there will be a new episode. We're going to get a lot of people. We're going to get a just in and out. And The Floor is Lava is too physical of a series really to get to that point, because it is much more like, much more physical. Well, not even really being that physical. Yeah, but I swear I watched something else, and I cannot even remember what it is. Alright, well, we already started late, so we should talk about video game news and just jump into it. It's highly unlikely that there would be any new events that happen this Friday. And we probably, if we want to have a really accelerated experience, should consider getting rid of we destroy that. How can a continuous trap potentially stop a trap designed to destroy that trap? Wouldn't that always destroy it? Well, it did destroy it, but it let it activate its ability first. Interesting. Toss this one. Activate this. Toss this one. We definitely are back to playing with the Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck now. The meta has changed again enough, at least at this lower level, where it makes sense and I enjoy it certainly a lot more than playing the flow-on disc. Now, does that make the best content ever? No. It does create a pretty repetitive gameplay experience for people who have been watching longer. I did try to contact that person who has like the @Rydo handle. Don't contact them yourself, please. I suspect, since it's like a 13-year-old account that hasn't had any new content in 13 years, that whoever made that channel to post their what seemed like private videos and made them public didn't realize what they were doing and have long since just stopped using that email, stopped using that. And that inherently, I think that is the problem with the handles as a concept, is that people who are going to have an argument for being more deserving of specific handles and trying to get kind of a verification or something that makes sense, like a not quite a blue check mark, but some kind of, hey, this makes sense for this handle to be associated with this channel. I think YouTube is almost certainly going to have to start taking away handles from people, and you're going to start getting kind of nasty emails that say, hey, you're going to lose your handle, or we made a mistake assigning this handle or this personalized email. But yeah, I tried to as kindly comment on their video, which was really the only way to contact them, which in fairness is also really the only way to contact me, because I don't want to get a bunch of spam. You can put an email on your YouTube page, but for like business contacts, but I don't think many people should or would do that. So did we do everything? Declare an attack to a monster. I guess arguably I should play one more game and just make sure we declare an attack to a monster. Although, it seems like that would have been a pretty easy thing to have already have done. And I kind of am at the point where I really expect it. But yeah, I tried to contact him and ask him. And that's the best I can do and the best I should do. It really isn't fair unless YouTube just decides that they're going to play unfair and change the rules for everybody, for me to try and steal a handle from somebody just because I've done a lot more with it. There is this not very successful Australian like Uber company also using the name Rydo, RYDO, and it's not particularly successful on YouTube either, but it might be successful as a business way more than my YouTube channel, so they also would have an argument for that handle, or depending on what handles become, if handles become anything at all. But yeah, we're gonna, if they do become something, it's gonna be quite the nightmare. Like, the last thing you want to do is mess this up so badly that there are way more people blocking other people because of handles than are actually interacting with people because everybody's using the wrong handles. But maybe it's not really going to work that way too. Maybe you can't use @Rydo, or maybe it will just autofill when you try to do a comment on my videos. Maybe you can't actually like tag people. If you can tag people, that would even in itself be a little weird, because that system isn't going to be a great system. if I take this and use this to bring this to the hand, and then I activate this, I guess part of the problem with this deck is that you don't have as much of a tendency to attack monsters as much as you have a tendency to banish monsters and then attack directly, which is great for winning, but not great for getting that daily quest done. Okay. Now we activate this and discard this. Destroy that. Destroy that. And just win. We're just on a win streak, so as long as we know we haven't declared an attack to a monster, I guess we keep on playing. Let's see. Starting with Video Games Chronicles articles. First, Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope DLC requires the game's season pass. We already talked about that. Modern Warfare, don't care about Modern Warfare at all, but it's adding ranked play. A lot of these are old articles anyways. I'm still not 100% sure what is going wrong with my macro that is opening so many old articles. If I fix that, then that would be just yet another optimization to get through the news faster, which I think everybody would really appreciate that. There's no reason to waste. So that didn't quite work the way I wanted it to work, but I guess we'll see if he's got anything else. We'll just counter his ability. And so I think at that point that means I've probably countered all of his counters and he's out of moves, so as fast as possible. I still wish we could automate some of these actions, just script it, because this is a lot of clicking. And this deck in particular is very focused on positional placement. If specific cards can be assigned to have preferred positions, there might be something to that idea also. Darkest Dungeon, each hero class has a preferred position and they can only do specific attacks in specific positions, which honestly just makes a system that's complicated. Like, it's not a better system in Darkest Dungeon. Let's see. God of War Ragnarok's PS5, PS4 Pro, and PS4 graphics modes have been confirmed. If you want to read that article, so several different graphics modes. Witcher 4's game director has been revealed. Sebastian Calabam was formerly the CD Projekt Red's animation director. So they hired from inside, which I don't know if that really means anything at all. Like, you look at Cyberpunk 2077's animation, and it's too unique and niche to really get any kind of idea around that. And if anything, a lot of the animation and design around Cyberpunk is also around like the Cyberpunk board games and the general concepts of Cyberpunk. So I don't know if there's a lot of creativity there in the first place. The graphics definitely did look good in The Witcher 3, and they were applauded for that. But does that make you a good... does being a good animation director mean you're a good game director? Maybe, maybe not. I would say, generally speaking, probably not. Being in charge of understanding a field of animation doesn't help you understand the programming, the QA testing, the sound design, the writing. Like, you may be great at directing your animators, but that doesn't inherently mean you'll be great at directing anyone else. But also, it is way too early to say, well, this is the death of Witcher 4 before it even starts, and it's way too early to say this guarantees success on The Witcher 4. It's going to be years until The Witcher 4 is even ready to start thinking about being released, and anything could change, anything could happen. There is a lot higher chance, in my opinion, that Witcher 4 will be bad because of how bad Cyberpunk 2077 was, than it would be good. So they have a lot of hurdles they're going to have to work on. But yeah, it's far too early to be even talking about Witcher 4. All we're trying to do is declare one battle against one monster. I guess I could have summoned my guy, but I didn't. Let's see. Nintendo of America has revealed its Black Friday details, including the familiar Mario Kart 8 Deluxe hardware bundle and software promotions. Now, I am going to stupidly try to not spend any money at all on Black Friday. I'm going to try to stay mostly away from slick deals unless there's just a major sale on something, but I don't even know what that something would be, because like I've just, with my irrigation system hoses, garden hoses bursting and all of that, there's just been a lot of maintenance and repair stuff, that boring stuff that I've blown my budget on. So any fun stuff, while it would be fun to get it, I'm really not going to try to do that for Black Friday. Inherently, the Prime Day sale is replacing Black Friday, and if anything, it should have worked a lot better than it did. That first Prime Day sale in the middle of the year, but yeah. And as far as like the Nintendo Switch in particular, I still have not made any real progress because I've been working on other projects as far as playing Zelda Breath of the Wild. So while there are a couple other games I'd like to play on the Switch, it's not a lot. It really isn't a lot. I'd like to play a couple Pikmin games and the Luigi's Mansion game, and that's it. Like most of these like Mario Kart, Splatoon games, which look fun, just require online play with other kids, and I'm frankly too old to be playing with little kids on little baby games like that. And these WarioWare get-together, Big Brain Academy, Brain vs. Brain, being discounted are hardly the ones you really would want. You would want, I guess, one of, like, you probably have most of these games if you have a Switch. That's the thing. You'd want like Bayonetta 3, Well, you'd want something brand new, and Nintendo really doesn't even have anything new to offer. So yeah. Now, generally speaking, the Nintendo Black Friday sales have never been that good. Anyways, Nintendo is greedy, and that they have those first party titles that either you pay full price or you pirate them, and that no wonder they're always fighting piracy, is because the one thing they could do to fight piracy as a Japanese company they're not willing to do, which is lower their prices to a more reasonable price. Like the Switch and Switch games really at this point should be the games of note that are just way cheaper than Xbox or PS4 games. I wanted to attack this, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. Yeah, I think that stops that ability from working, so... There, we attacked a monster just to get the daily quest done. So this was a bit of disappointing news. Square Enix has announced a playable NFT collectible art experience under the name Symbiogenesis. There was a lot of hope when this trademark came out that this was potentially a Parasite Eve remake. There's a niche fandom that would have liked to see a remaster or remake of Parasite Eve. No such luck, obviously. And that is very much to the disappointment of Parasite Eve fans, and generally just a disappointment to people who hate NFTs. Now, maybe there was a general thought that they would play this safe and pay for the trademarks, because lawyers cost money, and get the trademark of Symbiogenesis so that they could use it if the NFT art collection doesn't work. So maybe this is a twofold attack. In the same way, if Valve came out with a new NFT project called Half-Life 3, people would be incredibly disappointed around that, but at the very least, the copyrights and trademarks for Half-Life 3 could be renewed, and that funding could be used for something else. And this guy is wrecking all my tricks. But yeah, Square Enix, again, really showing that they're not the company you really want to trust with as far as the IPs that they actually own. And they're not really that interested in making games that people want to see. Unfortunately, that's a growing problem amongst game developers in general, is that they are getting further and further away from making games gamers want to play. So as much as gamers may say, well, why do I not like these games anymore? I think there is definitely an argument to say that it's the games that have changed as much as anything else. Like, when every single game you play has this DLC, season pass, microtransaction element to it, and that's just not the games you grew up with, and that's not the experience you want. It's not surprising that somebody is selling you something completely different and just using the same names and same labels. Last chance to get a victory here, I would say. could possibly chain that, but I'm just hoping this ability still works. Well, that sucks. It's kind of play still. This guy's doing a really good job of controlling my deck. Video Games Chronicle says Arcade Paradise's first DLC and official soundtrack are available today. I don't really recall anything as far as Arcade Paradise. I didn't hear anybody say anything about it. Which that is increasingly a that really is a problem, I think, more and more, is we've lost any mainstream video game journalist, or I have, that I want to listen to, or that I trust, as far as just reviewing or playing games. It's been a very slow year, certainly, but it's probably been 4 or 5 years since Giant Bomb mostly had been the source of playing new games. But you don't even see, like, other YouTube channels stepping up and playing new games. So as the paradigm shifts, if I was a bigger YouTuber, I would definitely be trying to play new games all nonstop all the time. I think Twitch in particular led to this situation where people are just playing the same games over and over again. I guess I could activate a spell since I'm about to lose anyways. It's not so much a big deal that I do lose here. But yeah, we still probably have a lifetime goal. Like, even though it won't change the outcome, playing one more spell towards your lifetime goals is just one more spell. Ah, but it didn't let me activate that. Anyways, whatever, fine. And we're only an hour into the stream, but we started late, and honestly, an hour in probably is where I should stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just like, you're gonna get an hour of Yu-Gi-Oh! And accountability section and catch up and ranting, and then at that point I should just focus solely on the news. So there's like a Video Games Chronicles article here. Who is working for the Yakuza creator Toshihiro Nagoshi's new studio. Video Games Chronicles tend not to really do an analysis, but I guess they wanted to point out that veterans from Square Enix, FromSoft, Capcom, and more are working with this guy, which there definitely is. They're listing each person, which that is nice, certainly, and giving even a little bit of a backstory on these characters. There is definitely a new movement in Japan under at least video game companies, in which people are not sticking with the companies and moving over to new companies. Now, inherently, I don't know if that really is going to change as much as they hope it will change, because for this new Yakuza studio to succeed, that they are still competing against the likes of the old video game companies, Square Enix, Capcom, things like that, and they have to not only be successful by doing things nicer. I mean, you look here, you are getting away from what would have been a everybody should be in a tie and a suit mentality, and that all of the offices should look dark and gray, and and old. Like, this group photo looks way better. It is still a issue. I think particularly in Japan, I don't think too many. I think there is definitely a lot fewer female workers in general. A lot more housewives in Japan, but also probably just a lot of sexism still in Japan. Let's not beat around the bush. And so you're noticing here a lot of Japanese Asian guys, and not a single woman. The only woman I think I would see here is probably the secretary. And then there's this Jonathan Lee character, who I would assume is this guy, who I doubt is Asian. It's kind of hard with Japanese names to tell the gender, certainly. But yeah, Mizuki Nakata. She said, "I am here to support Mr. Negoshi and his colleagues so they can concentrate on their development work. He, his, he's, his. The artist here, Miyako Iwano, is a female, she's. But, so there's two females. He. He. Okay. So, two females, neither one of them in this picture. So, yeah, that's weird. But yeah, the gender breakdown here, if you want to look at the world through a gender breakdown, which maybe you don't, is pretty rough though for what you would imagine it should be. And particularly in Japan, like, artists being female is not super uncommon, and that's why the one of these artists is female. But programming, game designs, anything else, very male dominated. The Japanese society, very male dominated, for better or worse for the male's gender in Japan, as they often get overworked and underpaid. But yeah, it's a little odd for Video Games Chronicles to do this kind of analysis, but actual news, informative. I would definitely take these kinds of articles over another secret ad for Modern Warfare 3 or another yellow journalism ad that is just trying to push a narrative. Speaking of pushing of narratives, Tencent, of all people, the video game company, I think if I'm recalling correctly, has bought Anime News Narrative, and Anime News Network. Now, many years ago, perhaps a decade or two ago, Anime News Network felt like your de facto source for news around anime. At a certain point, they started to get, I think, really SJW-y, and maybe they were always that way and it just wasn't so obvious at the beginning. They were big proponents of repeating and attacking Vic Mignogna. They've written a lot of ridiculous articles in just misstating facts around certain anime shows and just kind of hating on specific anime shows. So it is weird, certainly, that Tencent would own them. It may not have been Tencent, actually. It may have been something more like Crunchyroll. Regardless, it is far too small of a company to have been bought by either Tencent or Crunchyroll or Funimation. It may have been Funimation too. We're starting to see in the anime industry in particular a lot of just acquisitions of things, with the right stuff being acquired by Crunchyroll and that now Anime News Network being acquired by it. It oddly. What is going on? All of a sudden, my phone started playing music. I have no idea. Oh, I bet that's it. Yeah. Had a live stream that stopped on YouTube and then it started up again. Yeah, we may be seeing the creation of like vertical monopolies in anime, and potentially a shift in anime, a shift in the focus on animation style and themes might eventually trickle down back to being video game news if we start to see video games also being affected with it. Funimation and Sony definitely having their hands in both video games and anime. But yeah. On the other hand, the Anime News Network being acquired might change things for the better. And we're just at such a different position nowadays. Like, if you want to watch an anime show, you just go to Netflix or Hulu or Prime Video. Prime Music also has a lot more random music you can listen to, they announced. Let's see, moving on to video game news. The Epic Games Store's next free titles have been revealed. They will be Alba, A Wildlife Adventure, and Shadow Tactics Blades of the Shogun. Okay. Let's see, God of War Ragnarok is the second highest rated new game of the year, which really, I think, just highlights that there haven't been that many games of the year at all. So you pretty much can tell what the Game of the Year awards are going to be. A lot of people are going to give it to God of War Ragnarok for Game of the Year, because it will just be slightly newer. And then a lot of people are going to give it to Elden Ring. And then there will probably be a hard struggle to find a number 3 to even talk about. Yeah, because then you start getting into things people really didn't play as much, as far as Neon White. I don't even recognize Norco as number 4. Or Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is probably not going to get any rewards. Yeah, the award season this year is going to be pretty awful. Just because nothing came out. Let's see. Moving on, Hideo Kojima breaks silence on, quote, abandoned conspiracies. It's really quite a nuisance, is the quote. Now, here's a problem with using a forward tick mark as a quotation mark instead of using a back tick mark or double quotes, and why it's much better to just straight up use double quotes always. It's because you have a quote here, an apostrophe here, single quote here, apostrophe here. It looks exactly the same in the font, and then single quote. It may very well, in the Unicode, in ASCII code, be the exact same character. Blue Box Game Studio and Hassan Karman have both seemingly stepped away from the internet. I don't know anything about this. He's spoken openly for the first time about the controversial indie title Abandoned and the theory that he was involved in some way. So he was on a Spotify podcast, Brain Structure, as part of a new episode of featuring Jeff Keighley. Is this a new podcast maybe I should be listening to? Maybe. The pair were talking about gaming rumors. The Death Stranding director addressed speculation that he was involved with Abandoned, a horror game from the developer Blue Box Studios. Users just keep sending me pictures of this Hassan, Kojima told Keighley. They still send me collages and deep fake images, like 20 a day. It's really quite a nuisance. And then he laughs. this really is probably an example of Kojima shouldn't be in charge of his own Twitter account. And yeah, Twitter itself is seemingly losing all of its employees and slowly possibly losing all of its contributors and content creators and users. So maybe if there is a new Twitter competitor out there, a lot of these companies and these individuals of note, these celebrities, will hire social media managers, because it really is fairly obvious that Kojima should not be looking at his own Twitter. He should have a secretary that's sorting through them and getting the important Cliff Notes version to him, and that's it. The idea of instant interactions or instant responses on Twitter is not even something that is like something that people really expect or that you really even get. Like, you can probably complain about even a big company like AT&T or Verizon or something, and it may be several minutes to several hours before they would even respond with a canned response through some application. Most of these companies do have a program that is just giving canned responses, and there's not even a human looking at them. See, continuing, aside from a brief teaser, virtually nothing from the game has been shown of Abandon, despite repeated delays. A playable prologue, which Hassan claims will fund the final game, has yet to be materialized. What's interesting here is that they're showing the Death Stranding video. So yeah, apparently there's just this conspiracy theory, and you're running into like a Streisand effect. A Streisand effect where you're talking about a game I've never even heard of. And this is a lot of text basically to say that there is no connection between them. It seems like what happened here is that the creator of this game, Abandoned, is desperately trying to feed into a conspiracy that Kojima is connected, when seems fairly obviously fairly obvious he isn't. If he was connected, Kojima almost certainly would talk about it. It wouldn't be within him to not talk about it. He would try to promote it. He would mention it. You wouldn't just stay silent. You wouldn't just deny. Apparently there was also a Moby Dick thing. He says, when we did that Moby Dick thing, you, Jeff Keighley, were in on the whole thing, and that was pretty fun, but people should know that I wouldn't do the same thing twice. The Moby Dick thing Kojima refers to is that a fake studio that Kojima created before the announcement of Metal Gear Solid, Moby Dick Studios, released a trailer for the Phantom Pain. However, eagle-eyed viewers of the trailer noticed that the logo for the fake game featured cutouts into which the words Metal Gear Solid 5 could fit. Fans speculated that Blue Box Studio and Hassan could be further inventions of Kojima. This is really the entirety of this article. I've never spoken with Hassan. The game is yet to be released. I do not think there's much he can say or do at this point, but if he releases the game, people might understand, so maybe he should just hurry up and release it. Hassan hasn't spoken publicly about the game in some time, and his tweets are currently protected. In April, Blue Box Games tweeted asking fans if they wanted to see development footage of Abandoned prologue. However, nothing came of this. Yeah, the real problem here is the Streisand effect, because this is a story I would have never heard anything about had he not gone on a podcast and talked about it. Although inherently going on a podcast and talking about things is a great way to create news. can you listen to things without having a Spotify account, or can you have a free Spotify account is the question, I guess. Because, yeah, I remember he announced this podcast thing, and if anything, that really just highlighted the problem of him having too much free time again. That if you can do a podcast when you're supposed to be making a game. Let's see. He's also doing everything in English and Japanese, which I assume the English one is translated in a lot of cases, or maybe the Japanese one is translated. But yeah. In the first episode, there's dive into the brain for 25 minutes, and then 32 minutes talking about the film Nope in the second episode. And yeah, I think this is his outlet, but should his outlet really be should his outlet really be a public podcast, or should he just have conversations with people and relax that way? Here he's talking to Mamoru Oshii, who is the director of Ghost in the Shell, and that turned into an hour-long discussion. It's not even that long, so like, you do a podcast for 30 minutes, and he's probably getting paid by Spotify to do this podcast, and that's the only reason he's doing it. Like, you're probably going to spend 3 or 4 hours editing a podcast. Translating it into Japanese might be another 4 to 8 hours. And then, you know, you have him talking to Jordan Peele, which, let's see, Jordan Peele, Get Out and Us, that's what I thought it was, but I wanted to double check it. So it's not until like the 10th episode that he even talks about video games, it seems. So this would be a really bad podcast for me to listen to. And I don't know who this Bashu Bali series is. Sounds like it's probably an Indian series I've just totally missed. At a certain point, if you're going to be a video game person, you gotta kind of be into the video game news and out of other kinds of news. You can't really assimilate all the entertainment or all the news that happens around the world. The problem certainly there is that a lot of people become politics people, whether they meant to or not, and then all they talk about or think about is politics. Whereas I would much prefer to be a video game person and be video games. And certainly I imagine most people should be more varied and worldly to just kind of understand what's going on in the world in general on a surface level. But yeah, I definitely couldn't listen to that podcast even if I had a Spotify account. And I would say at this point, the podcasts that Spotify has tried to get into haven't been enough for it to really make sense that anybody would jump on, unless you just were a Joe Rogan fanboy and had to hear everything from Joe Rogan. But yeah, ever since Joe Rogan Experience went to Spotify and stopped being on YouTube, I really haven't missed anything. I don't think. I didn't really watch Joe Rogan in the first place, so I wouldn't have missed much, but it's not like he has done amazing episodes that people are talking about and commenting on. I'm not seeing any like reaction videos or commentary. I think very few people actually jump to Spotify to listen to him still. There is certainly a level, though, if Spotify started to create a ton of podcasts and buy out a ton of podcasts. to the point where the RSS feeds that I'm using now, which were free and open, all stopped working. Spotify could destroy the idea of RSS feeds, which would suck, but that probably would affect me more than most people. Anyways, we're supposed to be talking about video game news. Modern Warfare 2 composer says the soundtrack is not her artistic intent. Sarah Schreier says she can no longer work the game's audio director. Interesting to have such a big blow up around the audio. Yeah, that seems really weird for just an audio from the outside perspective, for an audio group of people to fight and split up, but I guess if anything it may highlight that she is actually passionate about the audio and her artistic intent as far as audio. Oh yeah, that was one thing. On the Roku channel, Weird, a Al Yankovic story, or whatever the name of the movie is now out, and I would highly recommend anybody who likes Weird Al to watch this parody of a biography that is completely inaccurate and completely untrue. There are definitely some aspects to it that are in line with my understanding of his history, but Weird Al's actual history and rise to success and fame is actually incredibly boring, and that's why there really hasn't been a biography around it. So by having Daniel Radcliffe play Weird Al and changing things to make it completely ridiculous, you have a much more entertaining show. And comparing it to something like UHF, there is a much more realistic and connected storyline in the Weird Al movie, whereas UHF was just a bunch of scenes shot on a budget to do parody or comedic sections that would lead into parody songs that had already been written, which they don't have to do in this case because the parody songs are just Weird Al writing the parody songs. And that, yeah, at a certain point, I imagine you could think that it was just being a silly take on his actual life story, until about halfway through the movie. There is a danger, certainly, that you could consider it a very accurate life story all the way to the end, but you would really have to be pretty naive to believe that, because he straight up gets killed at the end of the biography, and Weird Al is still alive. Now, I do have a worry that Weird Al, who actually does show up in the movie, the actual Weird Al shows up in the movie as a business person. He may be completely bald now just because he's been wearing so many wigs and he's just particularly old, or he may be completely bald now because he is like doing chemotherapy. I mean, he's really, really old and he's been very successful, but he can't go on forever. He's outlived most musicians by not drinking and doing drugs, but there needs to be a new Weird Al. And at a point, I thought it was going to be what was the name of that band? Not Hall & Oates. Garfunkel and Oates, I believe, is the name of the band, which was two comedian ladies that had a short stint of a couple of soundtracks that were really good, but honestly, I don't think Garfunkel and Oates are staying together enough. They both kind of went on to do their own movie careers. In fact, in the Cabinet of Curiosities, Kate McCucci is one of the members of Garfunkel and Oates, and she's in that. And on Hulu, there's a movie, Hell Baby, that has the other tall blonde from Garfunkel and Oates, and she's in a scene in that where she is just this hippie lady and walks out of a shower and then stands completely naked for gotta be like 5 minutes straight. Like, so it seems like they were doing a joke or a gag there where how long can you have the longest nude scene possible? But she's just standing there talking to the person, and it's hardly like she's fairly skinny, so all you're seeing is a pretty natural female body standing there talking to her brother-in-law. Otherwise, I don't think the Hell Baby movie was really that good. But yeah, they've become comedic actors more than musician writers, and I don't know if they have enough new songs. And arguably, Garfunkel and Oates, and I am just rambling today. I recognize it. Their jokes were all dirty. Most of them were dirty. So they don't quite hit that same pattern as Weird Al, where Weird Al pretty much keeps everything clean. So if you wanted to be a new Weird Al and be amazingly successful, just be really good at playing a ridiculous instrument like the accordion, and have a great support band, and write clean parodies of songs. And you probably would do as best as you could do. That being said, there is a problem of there not being a lot of new songs in general to parody. This is hardly the era of the 80s when you have something like Michael Jackson's Beat It just getting played on the radio over and over again and everybody hearing it. The last major pop song that I recognize even coming out was the WAP, Wet Ass Beep. I'll censor myself there. That's the last major song I have heard even coming out, and I imagine that several other songs have come out since then, but they just don't get prominently talked about or played. Like having Billie Eilish songs in that Netflix movie, The School for Good and Evil, is also kind of an example of what the newest of the new musics can do, is that they'll end up on some Netflix movie soundtrack, and that's it. Which I guess does kind of get us back to music. I really hope in this story that it really is an artistic intent argument here. I really hope that this doesn't come back and the audio director says, no, she was sleeping with me, or she was trying to hit on me, or she comes back and knows actually the audio director was hitting on me and trying to sleep with me, or just being abusive and it's not a romantic thing at all. Like, I really would like to hear a conflict in the video game world be about actual artistic intent and not about, oh, I deserve a lot more money, which is just frankly came off as greedy, or that I deserve to be treated a lot better, which often comes off as true and accurate for as badly as some people do seem to be treated in the game industry. Really, the game industry and making video games should be a lot more fun than it ever sounds like it should be. And unfortunately, I think that is kind of a trap, that a lot of kids want to be video game creators and programmers, and then they're going to get into an industry that is not really anywhere as fun as they imagined. Personally, as somebody who programs, I actually do enjoy programming quite a bit to a certain extent, but I almost certainly wouldn't enjoy programming to the extent that I would have to do it to be a programmer. Like 8 to 16 hours a day of programming, or hardcore, really working the code stuff is not what I'd like to do. And depending on what kind of method there is around that. If there is a method around that, it can be very different. Because if you're doing like parallel programming and you have two people in front of the same monitor programming, that can be a very different experience than, say, submitting code and then that going to a committee and having a committee meeting to review the code, or having somebody who has more seniority over you reviewing your code, and holding it to some kind of really cryptic style code requirements or really strict guidelines. What is it called? Waterfall development is one that I've heard about that's like really bad. And there's definitely things that I've just never had to really collaborate with people in code. So trying to figure out how to use GitHub and have something like a GitHub version control and merging code together to work together is a very different experience than doing everything yourself. And half of my code programming, I am pretty much in a fugue state where I don't even remember what I'm doing, so trying to document that and write that can be a nightmare. And that only sounds slightly fun if you enjoy programming. It sounds like a nightmare if you wanted to make video games just because you have ideas and concepts for video games, which really just means you want to be a writer of a story, or you want to be the director of video games, but nobody gets to be a director of a video game without working their way out through the grunt work for the most part. Moving on, Marvel Snap will add a player versus player mode by the end of the year. The hit mobile game will soon let players challenge their friends. This is a bad headline in the sense that Marvel Snap already has a player versus player mode. It only has a player versus player mode. There is no PvE, player versus event, in the game at all. There is no player versus bot, or player versus anything else. The way this really should read is Marvel Snap will add a friend system by the end of the year, or you get rid of by the end of the year and then you have an actual shorter headline anyway. In a lot of ways, this again feels like, well, Marvel Snap may be trending, so let's make a article around Marvel Snap. Let's see, what else are they saying? PC early access, welcome bundle, reward delivery, inbox system variety, variant rarity system. That seems like there will be some kind of rarity system. They want to add an unranked mode, which at the moment the ranked mode doesn't really matter, so there's really not a reason to have an unranked mode. Battle mode versus friends, so they don't call it PvP. Collector tokens, which maybe that means something more could be unlocked, or another currency could potentially make things easier. They want to fix the PC widescreen user interface, which is just hideously ugly. And definitely that played a role in why I didn't want to jump over to Marvel Snap and play that. Yeah, and at a certain level, I guess if I really wanted to try and get more views, I should be playing Marvel Snap, but it never works. It just never works on YouTube. If you're a small content creator, trying to chase the new game as a video game creator does not work. And then they want to add titles, which again, that's not much of anything. And then in concept, so they're just thinking about it. New competitive modes, which that's very nebulous. Guilds and social systems, which probably not a smart move to get too deep into that, because then you're going to have people insulting each other and chatting and fighting each other, more infighting than necessary. In guilds, you have to have kind of a new competitive mode for a guild to make sense. In-game events is very nebulous, but obviously you need that. Infinity rank leaderboard, like obviously there should be a leaderboard. Collectible emotes, and card emojis are really just extra things, and then mythic variants. So they want to introduce cards that are going to be even harder to get, which if they introduce that idea, then they have to kind of change their system as to how you get cards. That yeah, it does seem like they're going to try to add more cards that are going to be variants and visuals of the cards that already exist that just look different, instead of adding new cards that have new effects or new card gameplay concepts. What is noticeably not in this list is the next major expansion with a new keyword, which would be the in-concept thing that you really would want to introduce here. Is to say, hey, the next major expansion is going to have a new keyword on top of like reveal, ongoing, move abilities, destroy abilities, can't be destroyed abilities, discard abilities. That's pretty much all the keywords in the game. But yeah, there should be more than likely what you would want to do, knowing Marvel, is you'd want to introduce scrolls and secret invasion as a concept. I mean, that is probably a pretty old event now, but it's not a terrible event to try and bring a bunch of Marvel characters and have different variants of Marvel characters show up. Otherwise, you're going to get into like Secret Wars or Spider-Verses or something that maybe is specifically about Spider-Man and nothing else. You could certainly get into some of the X-Men characters and have an entire expansion that's just like, let's go through the hundreds if not thousands of X-Men characters and introduce cards around each of those characters. But you probably would want to slowly add more X-Men characters. And you could certainly go back to something like the Phoenix Saga in X-Men and just go really, really far back and start from the beginning. You could certainly have the Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane characters. You could have story around a lot of these card characters too, because like Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane, and the original Spider-Man, not Miles Morales, all kind of have some short story you could tell to introduce those characters and give you more of a like little cutscene, little comic books. It is still crazy and that there is no connection to the actual Marvel comics here, whereas if this was the game that gave you a free comic book for every like 10 games you played, or 10 games you won on Comixology, a free Marvel comic to go read, a very old Marvel comic, that would be great. If you could integrate something like that and just bring back the old comics and try to increase interest. But Marvel themselves have pretty much said that they have no interest in actually making comics. They're just making comics as a test bed to make Marvel movies. And I believe J.J. Abrams now is in charge of Marvel. So anything, I guess, could change, and that could be a major change, really, now that we have J.J. Abrams in charge, but it may not be that big of a change at all, really. So there could be some interesting twists there. Moving on, the PlayStation 5 exclusive Ghost to Wire Tokyo is listed for Xbox on the Bethesda office wall. It will likely follow Deathloop and come to Xbox in March of 2023 is the speculation. So I guess somewhere on this wall, yeah, the Bethesda Studio Softworks new international publishing headquarters in London has a Ghostwire Tokyo wall art already listed for Xbox Series X and S as platforms. Why would you do wall art and then mention the thing that it's on? Is that what this image really is doing. Like, yeah, I'm not seeing anything here that does actually say for Xbox. This looks like this is just probably a sign. I don't know if I'd particularly want to be staring at this wall art, though, if you're in this office. But these might be meeting rooms where you're not staring at the wall art. But even then, I don't know if I really would want to be staring at the wall art for that. That's a little extreme as far as your decorating. Moving on, Sonic Frontiers is being streamed on Twitch after the street date is reportedly broken. Sega is currently battling to plug the leaks. I guess it would be interesting to see if people are particularly enthusiastic or happy with Sonic Frontiers. It's coming out next week, so really the best suggestion I think I can make is to say just don't worry about it. Like, you really shouldn't have been worried about Sonic Frontiers coming out even next week. You probably should wait 6 weeks to 6 months before even thinking about playing Sonic Frontiers, depending on how the reception and reviews are from people who are willing to actually play it day one and pay full price for it. Modern Warfare 2's new weapon attachment tuning feature has been re-enabled. NVIDIA hotfix addressed some critical issues with the PC version of the game. Speaking of not NVIDIA but AMD has announced its next generation of RDNA 3 graphics card technologies. So they potentially are again going to be a real competitor to NVIDIA graphics card. I don't know if I'm still at the point though that I would suggest getting an AMD graphics card or ATI graphics card over NVIDIA. There's just so many old games that are designed to really use NVIDIA hardware for PC that it's a real hard sell, certainly. Even though the fact is that the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X both use AMD graphics in their integrated system, and eventually I think that if that stays the way things go for the next generation of consoles and maybe even the next generation of consoles after that, that we would eventually see AMD games running better on AMD graphics even in PC. It's just not quite to that point yet. And then you have to be really careful about what you consider real successful performance in a graphics card these days compared to superficial numbers going up on a benchmark. Because in my case, I'm still playing 1080p. YouTube was even teasing or testing that you had to have YouTube Premium. They were thinking about doing YouTube Premium required for 2K and 4K videos, which, yeah, that would not encourage me as a content creator to try and make 2K or 4K videos. But my hardware almost certainly couldn't handle playing a 2K game and recording a 2K game at the same time without some other lowered stats. I'm more than happy to stay at 1080p, looking at a TV 10 feet away. If I change my setup and had a monitor much closer, I may slowly want to upgrade to 2K, but uploading those videos and people being able to watch those videos isn't really a high priority for me, so I don't feel a need for graphics cards to really do that. More RAM and faster RAM in a video card is the thing that I would want more than anything. Like, I would definitely say if you were considering getting a 3080 versus a 4080 and you can get a 3080 with twice as much RAM and the RAM is the same speed, the same GDRR, DDRR, whatever, same speed RAM for the 380 as the 480. Get the more RAM. You don't need more CUDA cores, in my opinion. You don't need over focusing on ray tracing, which very few games have actually implemented or done much with. You just need faster RAM, faster faster GPU speeds is nice, certainly, but more than likely your GPU speeds are not the bottleneck anyways. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles, we have 4 more articles here. God of War Ragnarok includes over 70 accessibility features, which this seems to be the default way in which games are taking that extra effort to promote themselves, is by saying, hey, we have a lot of accessibility features, which that's nice and all, but the next generation of interfaces, the operating systems for Xbox and PlayStation, really need to be the ones that establish a set of rules as far as new accessibility features. And I'm not sure if 70 is not way too many, really. We, despite having just lived through a pandemic, or still living through a pandemic, I guess, I don't think COVID left a lot of video gamers out there disabled in new ways. So the people who had disabilities and the types of disabilities have already existed. It is nice that they are now trying to accommodate and address those disabilities, yes, but that's not a number that just can go up higher and higher. At a certain point, you're just adding extra cigarette lighters in a car in 2022 when nobody is using a cigarette lighter to actually light a cigarette. But yeah, I would be more than happy if there was a standard set of, let's say, 100 even accessibility features that were by default enabled operating system wise for all games. Some of these features certainly also could be don't need to be really programmed into the game, because if it really is just changing certain colors for colorblind people, you could do that with a simple palette swap system wide. If it is always turning on subtitles, well, all games should be required to have subtitles, and that should just be enabled. Or if it's not enabled, there should be a pop-up at the beginning that just says, here's 100 accessibility features, and this game doesn't implement these features, so be warned. But yeah, the fact that we have different companies trying to do different types of accessibility features, and that they're spending so much focus and time on that, is a danger. Now, in the God of War Ragnarok's case, one hopes, and more than likely it is the case, that didn't hurt the quality of this game much, but it almost certainly hurt it a little. Almost certainly, if you're adding 70 accessibility features, you're not working on something else. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to really watch a video around that. Here we have the same article. Oh no, a follow-up article. Abandoned studio thanks Kojima for addressing conspiracy theories openly. Studio has asked fans to stop harassing Metal Gear Solid creator. So there is a actual follow-up to the Streisand's effect. Although I can't help but think that Blue Box Game Studios is more than happy for him to have addressed it publicly, because it gets their name out there and gets people talking about a game that I would have never even heard of anyways. It seems like a fairly magnanimous quote here, though, so it's probably not the worst thing to say. We want to thank at Hideo Kojima for addressing the conspiracies openly. And see, this is another example of like using somebody else's Twitter handle to get more coverage. It has been a burden and not cool for both fans and developers. we hope everyone can close this for good. So they're not leaving any room for doubt in this. They're not teasing that it might still be the case that he's secretly working for it. Of course, the conspiracy minded will just say, well, this is just part of the cover up, and Kojima still is working with Blue Box Studios and Abandon. But anybody who is more reasonable and has to take people's word realizes that you have to take people's word at face value until at least they prove themselves to be liars or deceptive. For those people, who knows how many of those people still exist, this is the right kind of response. And so Abandoned has managed to get two articles out of that. Gotten very lucky. I wouldn't be surprised if 6 months to 3 or 4 years from now, when Abandoned actually comes out, if it ever does come out, people are still talking about it and excited about it based on this one small conspiracy story. Moving on, footage of Hideo Kojima's unannounced Overdose game have seemingly leaked. The project was reported on in June and appears to be a horror game. Let's see, should we watch a game leak? Not really. Like, it's not worth your time to watch a game leak. And looking at this video, it seems like it's being taken off of a camera, off of a monitor. And what's the point of seeing a early development of a game that hasn't even been announced yet? So it is news, but it's leak news. It's not really important or impactful news, as it really shouldn't be. PlayStation Plus Premium is adding 5 more Ratchet and Clank games this month, which you would think, if you're adding 5 Ratchet and Clank games, that's probably all of the Ratchet and Clank games at this point. But maybe there has just been a whole bunch of side Ratchet and Clank games I'd just never heard of, not being particularly a PlayStation fan. Final Fantasy XVI producer claims medieval Europe setting placed constraints on the character's diversity. The story we're telling is a fantasy, yes, but it is also rooted in what is this saying? Sorry, my Firefox wants to reboot and it's popping up. But yes, it is also rooted in reality. Which, okay, at a certain level, that is believable, but also not believable enough to make enough sense. Like, nobody legitimate is going to really complain about the Japanese doing a little bit of revisionist history in a fantasy set in medieval Europe to bring in, say, a African character who maybe would have been a slave and became a free man from Africa and has dark skin. It is not even unrealistic in medieval Europe for there to be potentially a Middle Eastern, Asian, Muslim character to be brought in as a traveler, or again, possibly brought in as a servant or slavery. You don't have to say the word slavery. You could just say, we traveled from a far off land. The only people that you really couldn't tweak history or tell a story that would make sense would be to bring in a Native American First Nations character. That would not make a lot of sense in medieval Europe, or or like a South American, Central American, Spanish character wouldn't make a lot of sense. Even Japanese characters don't make the most sense, but it's not super unbelievable that you could squeeze something in. And when you look at this character, this really is a Japanese face to start with. The elephant in the room is Asian and Japanese specifically people just don't think about other races. They don't see them. They are on their little island that only sees Japanese people for the most part. If they do see if Japanese people in Japan see anybody else, they tend to either like positively stereotype them and are racist in a positive way to them. Sometimes, but if they're saying like Koreans or other Asians that are non-Japanese, there's a ton of anti-other Asian racism in Japan, and just all Asian countries hating each other for pretty good reasons, frankly. So it's just something that they don't think about. It's just not the world that they live in. And so when they think of medieval Europe, they're not thinking of a real medieval Europe in the first place. They're thinking of a fictional medieval Europe of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, which noticeably, there's not any non-white people in those stories, and it goes all the way up the line. So even if you did have a artistic artist who wanted to make a 3D character of a different colored skinned character, it would be rejected by their boss, who would then reject it, or it would be rejected by their boss, or it would be rejected by their boss. When you know that there's like an 80-year-old Japanese guy making all the real decisions at the top of the line, that 80-year-old Japanese guy is definitely not going to approve something like that. It's frankly a little shocking that we've had even as much diversity in the Final Fantasy series as we have had. And that is to say that there's probably been about 2 or 3 dark-skinned characters in Final Fantasy games. If you want to go through the history of all the Final Fantasy games, though, there is probably about 60 main characters you can look at, with most of them being white males, most of them being males, and most of them being white. And since a lot of the Final Fantasy games are set in complete fantasy worlds instead of being set in medieval Europe, his argument for why this is happening is not really realistic. This is a standard. We feel we need to respond to a question when really they should have just said no comment. Because the truth is, we should, if you're going to be upset about lack of diversity, which maybe you shouldn't, because maybe it is just the artist decisions and what they want to draw and what they know how to draw. Every time the Final Fantasy has depicted a African American type or African type character, they tend to often draw them in stereotypical terms with big lips, and it comes off as a little bit blackfacey and insulting. So it is a catch-22 for them. Even if they try to be diverse, people complain about it. This is more in line also with like the Pokemon people. They come out with Pokemon characters that are supposed to be based off of Asian people, so they're all light-skinned, and as soon as they draw an Asian character with even a slight tan, they either get accused on one side of of darkening the skin of a character or lightening the skin of a character uh, in Pokemon games. Or other people go draw fan art of the characters in dark skin, which is fine and dandy, but then they try to push that as that's the way it should be, and that their artistic creation should trump the original artist's intention. Yeah. There is a history, though, certainly, if we were to look at all the Final Fantasy characters. There's a lack of diversity there that maybe this conversation should happen in the minds of the creators, but it arguably shouldn't really happen in this case. And the fact that he's coming back and addressing it really is just him saying, yeah, that's never going to happen. Yeah. The phrase in Japanese is that would be very difficult, and most people don't understand that basically means F no. Like, and so the Japanese are kind of bad about just saying F no or screw that, because that's really their response. It's like, Japanese want to do their Japanese thing. They don't want any input whatsoever. They're going to create the art they're going to create. And if you enjoy it, great. If you don't enjoy it, great. If you want to boycott it because of your own personal reasons, great. Boycott it. But the one thing that will never succeed, Japanese people would rather go extinct and die on their die with their last breath, denying any change at all. Japanese people do not want to change how they do things. You can maybe over decades slowly get them to make some slight changes, but not really. There's plenty of Japanese people right now that would love to go back to being a warring country like in World War II and just pull a whole new Pearl Harbor 2 if they were allowed to and were given the power. That's how little the Japanese society, to generalize, is willing to change or learn or even admit that they were wrong in any way. And you just have to know that about that. And that's not even specifically special about Asian people or Japanese people. Like, pretty much nobody wants to ever change or do anything different than what they already planned. So you've got to go into it knowing that. Final Fantasy has changed very little in 16 different iterations as far as how it presents its art and the generic gameplay style and the generic stories it's going to tell. And it's not going to change. And that has allowed for there to be 16 different numbered Final Fantasy games, on top of there being a lot more spin-off Final Fantasy games. There has been some change in the art, certainly since Final Fantasy 1, but not by much otherwise. You've got a team, the team attacks a bunch of people in grindy turn-based actions. I think most Final Fantasy games are still turn-based, and then they go through a large fantasy storyline, and that is that. And notably, the only interesting parts of the 16 numbered Final Fantasy games are maybe a couple of games, like Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 13. So 2 out of 16 is not even particularly that high of a number as far as good quality games. If anything, if the Japanese were going to change how they do things, and Square Enix in particular, were going to change how they did anything, they would have canceled the Final Fantasy series potentially after Final Fantasy VIII, after it didn't do as good as Final Fantasy VII, and then they would have made other series by other names, which that is also what Square Enix is doing with the Scarlet Grace series and several other fantasy series that look very similar to Final Fantasy. Moving on, we're now at the Gamatsu articles, 2 hours into the stream. Octopath Traveler details, several details if you want to check that out at Gamatsu. Gigabash character DLC Godzilla launches December 9th. What is Giga Bash? I think this is a game that I wanted to keep an eye on. It's a very dark trailer, certainly, with the blur on. But then you have a very colorful logos. Yeah. So I assume this is just a kaiju game where you're running around destroying buildings. There may be 2 or even 3 kaiju games that have come out recently or been announced recently. So I could see that potentially being some competition between 2 or 3 kaiju games. It kind of makes sense that there would always be 2 or 3 kaiju games coming out each year, or at least one coming out each year. Moving on, Samurai Maiden has a EO trailer, which I imagine is this character. Samurai Maiden, if I'm recalling correctly, is, yeah, it is a potential Oni-chan clone where you're action beating up zombies or semi-zombies, and then there's also a lesbian relationship cutscene meter that you build to do super attacks, which could get very repetitive and definitely is trying to go for more of a exploitative thing. You can see it's going to be live 2D visual novel conversations also, so there might be a lot of that, certainly. And this Samurai Maiden seems like she is from like the future time, whereas all the other characters seem to be more in kind of a feudal Japan ninja time. So yeah, they're teasing another girl, which I imagine they'll do a lot of that. Finding Paradise for the Switch, iOS, and Android launches November 18th. Well, I guess I should mention that I noticed this morning that my daily Steam game had like 58 views, which is, for a YouTube short, quite a lot of views. So, yeah. If I was smart, I would be doing more YouTube shorts. I'd be thinking about other ways to make YouTube shorts. I'm watching more and more shorts and stories, so YouTube is pushing me into that direction of engaging with that type of content when I've never engaged with that content before. But what I'm mostly seeing is not great stuff. It seems like it is people trying to be very scripted and very clickbaity, while not really having much that they can say or anything to say at all. Which at a certain level, I guess my shorts embrace that idea and say, hey, I don't have anything to say at all in this format. I cannot possibly talk for a minute or less and say anything of importance. I would just ramble, even if I tried to script it. And that's probably why everything is so scripted, is that nobody can off the cuff talk for a minute or find a minute in a clip of their video that is actually worth talking about. There is potentially, I guess, a way in which I could be making the YouTube shorts while streaming, but I would have to have 2 versions of OBS running, and that probably would be a nightmare and cause it to crash. Yeah, this game was not as interesting as I thought it might have been. Witch on the Holy Night for the PS4 and Switch demo is now available, and they have another trailer. Is this a shoot 'em up game? Nope, it is a visual novel game. It's kind of a different art style. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out better ways to describe art styles like this. Like, it kind of obviously is probably an animator making this art style, but it is going with more of a flat realistic. Maybe that's the way to go with this, is 2D as a category and 3D as a category, because those are very easy splits to make as far as describing art styles. and then realistic versus moe versus kawaii versus chibi. Of course, all those secondary category definers would be are Japanese right now in my head. There could be a 2D Nickelodeon, 2D Cartoon Network, but even those as art styles would have to be explained better. Siphon Filter 3 for PS5 and PS4, and Ghost Trick have been rated for Korea, which maybe means there's a Ghost Trick remaster coming in. I remember the name of this game. I don't remember what Ghost Trick as a game, though, would be. And as far as Siphon Filter 3, this looks like a pretty old game. Famitsu sales have been updated. Let's see, Bayonetta 3 taking the number 2 spot away from only slightly below Splatoon 3, which is still selling pretty well. Star Ocean Divine Force for PS4, Call of Duty Modern Warfare for PS4. This may be the point where people are now buying games for their PlayStations, because we see a whole category here of games for PS4. Ace Angler Fishing Spirits, however, still beating out Call of Duty Modern Warfare for the PS5, and really only slightly less than Call of Duty Modern Warfare for the PS4. If you combine those two, the numbers would be higher, certainly. In fact, combined, it really would be beating Bayonetta 3. But a sales chart doesn't quite work that way. It's a lot of new games. So this probably, I would have to assume, is where the Golden Week sales numbers maybe are kicking in, or Golden Week sales are kicking in, because that is a lot. King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match Edition for PS4, though, doing particularly bad in the 28th position. And very possibly for the first time this year, the PlayStation 5 has, I guess, been in stock or is now desirable enough that it has outsold the Switch OLED model, whereas the PlayStation 5 has barely sold anything in previous weeks. The OLED model is still double, triple of what the PlayStation 5 overall has sold, and that's not even to talk about the Switch original version, which is at like 18 million compared to less than 2 million here. Xbox Series S, though, and Series X still selling pretty well. Switch Lite still staying around. PlayStation Digital Edition selling pretty good also. PlayStation 4, however, selling pretty poorly. And you have to just kind of assume anywhere that was in the past selling a PlayStation 4 is now selling a PlayStation 5. And I can't help but assume that the 11 units sold here and the 56 units sold here are being bought on just like standing orders, where companies are saying, or stores are saying, we always want a certain number of these every week because we are selling these as replacement things, and there's enough walk-in traffic where 11 PlayStation 4s being sold still makes some sense. Moving on, Front Mission First Remake has a gameplay trailer if you want to check that out. It does not look like a game that really interests me. But yeah, if the YouTube short is getting a lot of views, that means the stream might be getting some more views. Which, yeah, that would be nice. But the two are very different types of content, you have to admit. And like I have to realize that. And I can't imagine a way that I would be able to take a minute clip out of this and make a different kind of YouTube short experience. And I do have the ability to put community messages up, polls, things like that, but notably I have not had any thoughts to doing that other than that first do you like shorts or no shorts poll that I don't think anybody ever voted on. Yeah, I don't think I'd really want to engage with that too much. Um, there is possibly some way I could use it to promote the beginning of a new series and convince more people to check out new series or check out old series. There are, I guess, some games and some instances that I would make some sense to do some comments there. Like there have been a couple times where a game gets a new update or a sequel is announced. So if like Portal 3 was announced, just to make a fictional story or example, if Portal 3 was announced, that would be a great time for me to use a community post to say, hey, Portal 3 just got announced. Why don't you check out my Portal series here, Portal 1, Portal 2, and catch up. That's the kind of thing that feels like a real legitimate and good use of the community messages. Whereas just spamming people and saying, hey, check out this video, or check out this video from another channel, which I don't have another channel, so I'm not doing that. But I've seen other channels, other YouTubers do that, and it comes off kind of ineffective and boring. Moving on, Blood Bowl 3 launches February 23rd for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, and it's coming out later for the Switch, which, okay. I assume Blood Bowl 3 is the sequel to Blood Bowl 2, which is, I think, a kind of monsters football game, American football concept. Or a murder ball concept, if not actual American football. Yeah, it definitely feels like it is just an American football, a game with monsters. And I think Blood Bowl was pretty popular, at least the first one was, when it came out. But I think it came out quite a long time ago, too. So I guess the American football season is upon us, so now would be the time to release a new Blood Bowl if you're going to make it. The game Endling Extinction is Forever is now available for the PS5 and Xbox, according to Komatsu. Forspoken has a deep dive in Magic Combat trailer. It seems like they're going to just constantly show us deep dives. It does also seem like she just gets more and more of these golden decorations around her that gives her more and more abilities. But the more I see of this game, the more it just seems like this is a like MMO RPG type game. Big empty open world with a lot of room to fight people. Maybe in turn-based actions, maybe not. If you overcomplicate the game with some kind of magic system, that very possibly doesn't make a better experience. We're not seeing any real images of bosses. We're not really seeing any images of interiors, dungeons, traps, treasure chests, anything like that. We're not seeing any real story explained so far. Those are all things that could be added later, but so far we're not seeing a lot. Kaiju Wars for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series launches November 10th. Another kaiju game, but from the screenshot, a very different looking kaiju game than the other one. Sonic Frontiers has its Showdown trailer if you want to check that out. Ultra Age free DLC Rebirth Project is now available for PS4 and Switch, physical edition, and announced for the North America. Figment 2 Creed Valley launches in February of 2023 for the PS4, PS5, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. So basically everything now that Stadia is gone and we don't really talk about Amazon, Luna, or any other streaming service. Although at a certain point, it is a little crazy that Valve didn't secretly reach out to hire a bunch of the Stadia programmers and say, hey, why don't we make a streaming service for the Steam Deck particularly? Why don't we make some kind of internet-based streaming service that we could charge extra for? It is getting also to a weird point where I don't know if Xbox One and PS4 games should be announced even in February of 2023. It's not that far away, certainly, but we need to. I imagine, we don't need to, but I imagine we'll start to see fewer and fewer games actually released on the previous generation of consoles. But it's so easy, I guess, to make a PS4 version that is then forward compatible to a PS5 version, or an Xbox One version that's forward compatible to an Xbox Series version. Let's see, Escape Academy's DLC, Escape from Anti-Escape Island, launches November 10th. This was a game that people were kind of interested in for about a week, and then I guess everybody solved it, or they solved all the escape rooms, or they saw other people solve all the escape rooms, and then that probably killed most of the momentum for being enthusiastic on this game. This DLC is going to add 5 brand new escape room levels. I'm not sure if Escape Academy ever was kind of randomized, though, where you could play the game a second time, or even if it was randomized, if it would really be worth playing the game a second time. If, for instance, the first playthrough a code is 1, 2, 3, and then the second time you play it, it's 3, 2, 1, but the code and the where you find the code and how you find the solutions are all the same, that wouldn't change that much. Say the code is always written on a post-it on the refrigerator. If the number changes but where the post-it is, it doesn't change. That's not a big enough change. Ghost Runner 2 has a first concept work, which I guess I missed Ghost Runner 1 because I don't recognize a game called Ghost Runner. This looks cyberpunky, what is it, Blade Runner-esque more than anything. I think Blade Runner-esque is probably a better label for something like this than just cyberpunk. Yeah, anyways. But yeah, seeing concept artwork is not that important. Gumatsu says Colossal Cave is adding a PS5 and Xbox Series version. It was previously confirmed for Switch, PC, and Quest. Colossal Cave is the remake of a very, very old, I think text-based game called Colossal Cave that will now have graphics in it, obviously, but very possibly won't have much other than graphics being added and audio being added. It very possibly plays exactly the same as the text game, which means it very possibly will be a very cryptic and confusing puzzle game. A mountain climbing platformer called Surmount has been announced for PC. Is this another getting over it with Benet Foddy type climbing game? I don't really think it is. I think this is, if anything, something closer to a mix between Breath of the Wild's climbing mechanics with stamina. You see a little stamina bar, and maybe something like the game Grow Home and Grow Up as a series. And I like to Grow Home and Grow Up as a general idea of climbing. There does seem to be maybe some gadgets and items you'll also be able to use to make this more fun, and it does seem like it's maybe going to try and attract younger kids. I guess the question that I would want to ask here is, can you play in single player, or is there a much better reason to have co-op? And I might question if there's maybe an overemphasis on customizing your characters and having items. This could be a game that's fairly boring too if you're not into mountain climbing. And there is a certain level as far as should you encourage kids to be mountain climbers or encourage anyone to be mountain climbers, because it is a pretty dangerous hobby. Like climbing on a climb wall where there's something soft you can land on in the proper gear is one thing, but when you get outside of a facility, the odds of somebody doing something wrong with the gear or it not being safe go up significantly. And to climb a mountain just because it's there is kind of a silly reason to climb a mountain. But people do it, and it's not the worst exercise or habits I've ever seen people have. Moving on, Neo Geo Pocket Color Selection Volume 2 launches November 9th for the Switch and PC, and here we can see a collection of what looks like mostly Capcom or SNK characters. But these would all be Neo Geo games, so the images you're seeing here are probably more deceptive than you would think, because these would all be like really short, small games, and that's why you can put 10 titles in one game and sell it as one thing, because unless you have nostalgia for some of these, which you probably won't if you're not Japanese, you'd find them fairly lackluster. Moving on, Cleopatra Fortune S Tribute launches November 24th, which I would assume this is a match 3 game, puzzle game, and I'll leave it at that. This also feels like this might have been a particularly old game getting re-released. Tiny little pixely Cleopatra anime character here. This is like an early 80s realistic animation that would have been in that time when anime or Japanese animation really was just trying to ape realistic depictions of people and nothing else for a lot of implementations. Not always though. Like, there's another early 80s Japanese person animated it, but trying to make it really realistic. Elevator Action returns as Tribute launches December 1st. Elevator Action, I believe, is also a very simplistic old game that you probably don't want to play. I guess the question here would be if Elevator Action Returns is the sequel to Elevator Action, and then the S Tribute logo here, which looks way more modern, is actually a indicator that they're re-releasing it. It's a 2D side-scrolling shooter game, which is not really what I expected Elevator Action to be, but whatever. Final Fantasy XVI's development is about 95% complete. Release date to be announced by the end of 2022. Yeah, at 95% complete, if they really did want to change something, it wouldn't be hard to mod out some of the NPC characters and change their skin tone and make them look a little bit different, even if none of the main characters' visuals changed at all. Or you could even throw a bone and have like a secondary character change the skin tone on that. PlayStation Plus Classics adding 5 new Ratchet & Clank games. We already talked about that. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart 20th Anniversary Armor Pack update is also now available. It's 5 skins inspired by the games throughout the series history. They are definitely trying here to make Ratchet & Clank still a thing in people's minds, so I wouldn't be surprised if a new Ratchet & Clank game gets announced. The Dark Pictures anthology, The Devil in Me, has a character introduction trailer if you want to check that out. I'll skip it. And then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is coming to PS5 on November 15th. Which, okay, that is a nice announcement. Okay, so here we have a not safe for work, sexual content, nudity, dungeon crawler. First game this Friday, which does kind of push back into the idea of bundling on the weekends as far as adult games. That being said, Archmage Rika isn't really showing anything other than a lot of cleavage in this pretty low effort dungeon crawler game. $8.09 Japanese full audio, Chinese only. As mature content, cartoon pornographic content, sexual assault, violence only for adults. That's an interesting way to use it, or to phrase it, which would maybe make me lean towards maybe this is a Chinese game first, but maybe not, since it does support Japanese language first. It looks bad regardless, but as far as the flat anime art style, or flat unrealistic art style games, that's what I would put this in the category of, certainly. And then there definitely are some more definitions I'd have to think in my head. Like, it is possible somebody could have massive amounts of hair all the way down to their buttocks. Is that really a realistic depiction of people, though? Probably not. Big eyes are way more obvious. No nose, big mouth, giant head compared to the shoulders. Those all lead towards obvious factors as to why giant breasts for your waistline and your butt, your hip size. But yeah, I would definitely put that in the adult category. And either I had two of the same things, or I didn't click on the X here. This game is also not in the adult section, or there was one in the adult section and one not in the adult section, which that may very well highlight the weirdness of the adult section on Steam anyways. If you can release the exact same game twice in the adult section and the non-adult section, like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I'm gonna assume that I just did not actually click on the X there. So we do have one tick mark as far as the scales, as far as a more anime art style adult game. And Wednesday we kind of saw more of an anime style adult game. Here we have yet another anime style adult game, Sakura Segment 0.3 Prologue, which looks like kind of complete garbage. This anime cat girl in barely a toga clothing in several different positions, being engaged with just these gray shadowed out characters. It's $8.99 and again claims full Japanese audio and English interface. And the mature content, when it does seem to me like what's going on here is mature content description gets moved to the top if you're in the adult only section, but not otherwise. It says nudity, sexual content, frequent violence, sexual assault, non-consensual sex, general maturity, all characters are over the age of 20. Why not just make up the number and go 21 at that point? What is this obsession? I don't know why the law is ever written that way when you're talking about animated characters in the first place, as far as what age they're supposed to be. But that is two bad anime style adult games today, and we've yet to see a CGI realistic, more Western adult game. And then the rest of these games, are so garbage that I'm not really seeing anything. This one doesn't support English, only Spain Spanish. Otherwise, I may have given this a chance. This could have been an adventure game of some note, although really I'm not seeing anything here that really does show enough that it would deserve to be on the fall list. Right, here we have CG characters, but this is some kind of Sims clone. If anything, I guess it's a meme. These characters look awful, certainly. And looking at like how this dress fits, you almost wonder if this was a CGI character that was nude and then they had to add the cloth and the clothing later. But yeah, none of these characters look good. And the fact that there's just such an emphasis on showing these characters, I think, betrays that there actually isn't much of a game here. It seems like it is just Espresso Tycoon, I guess, is a coffee shop simulator. But boy, does it look like garbage. And yeah, it's no wonder that I just am so easily and readily willing to skip over a lot of these games when they are just awful. This Asian cargo ship, I think, also is an attempt at being a meme, because I saw some people were talking about how like amazingly decorated these cargo shipping trucks are in Asia. People own their trucks and they take real pride in them and just like overly decorate them. But for an actual video game, this is a visual mess, and even in reality it's a visual mess, and it contrasts horribly with generic grass and generic walls, and there really is not any game there. This one, if it showed me an interface and some actual gameplay, may have given me some pause to not reject it, but you can see it's also mixed. This is some kind of Chinese or Japanese card game. It doesn't look terrible, but I don't suspect it actually supports English, even though it says it does. And yeah, if anything, I am starting to move further away from even wanting to play card games. Like, if I could find a great replacement for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, I might consider it, even if it isn't a card game. There's another troll joke backrooms game, which we're still consistently seeing these backrooms games. They seem to have replaced Five Nights at Freddy's clones and some maze games that otherwise would have existed. I haven't seen this board game before. I've seen something somewhat similar, but not this one, so I'm going to give this a follow, just in case. Should I do a YouTube short on it? Sure, why not? Now, I should also probably investigate why the YouTube short I have right now did so well. It was for the game Half Dead 3, and so it may be Half Dead 1 and 2 got it more views, or maybe it's the phrase Half Dead or the visuals. Tint and Ink, I will give a follow to also. It is potentially dangerous that I take the wrong message and then all of a sudden all the YouTube short games I try to cover have dead in the name or are more violent. Actually, I probably couldn't really change or curate what I show off that much as far as YouTube shorts though, because you're inherently limited to actual games worth mentioning. I'll give this a follow, but I'm not going to make a short on that. And see, there's another, like, here's a second copy of that. I think my duplicate tabs maybe was not working today because of need for an update. I hope they haven't done something where the plugin stops working completely, because I need something to prevent duplicate tabs, and any new plugin I potentially need to install could potentially break all the other plugins already installed. So, Dragon Evo, I'll give that a follow. If we see only 2 adult games on this Friday, that's not even going to be that much. Juno of 6. I kind of like this different art style. I don't know what I describe this as. Almost like a flat comic book sketch style. 2D sketch, 2D comic book, 2D minimalist. But yeah, I like the character design, but looking in the background and seeing what the actual game looks like, it does not look good. So I'm gonna have to say no to that. A fox running around. There's so many games with foxes running around. So I'll give that a follow, but no short. More than likely there's just a Unity asset of a fox that is easy to buy and make a low effort game around. Here we have another Big Fish hidden object game for $12.59. Big Fish games being fairly consistent. However, Stelia from Square Enix here, not being well received at all at 47%. So, is it worth showing off a game if it's not being reviewed well and making a YouTube short around a game that's bad? No, I don't think so. I think at a certain point it is always just going to be a curation, and if half of the players, I guess I'll give this a follow just in case a lot of people jump into this, but yeah, if I get around to making YouTube shorts this weekend, which I should, I probably would skip Harvestelia. Maybe even leave it for another week just to see if the reviews change on it. Bitter Belief looks like it might be something. We've got a lot of games still to look at. It might be worth it to turn off the blurring of videos, of YouTube videos, too. Yeah, this might be something. It looks unique. Here we have another adult only and game Shrine of Tales. Let me see if it's YouTube family friendly. Nope. Very second screenshot has 2 flat demon girls groping each other's breasts. The animation is pretty bad here, and it's at a weird 4:3 ratio. Yeah, and it is kind of a flat anime style, I guess is what you call it. If they're going to have demon horns at some point, it is definitely an unrealistic style at that point. It's $4.39. It's English and Russian. That would explain the bad graphics. So Shrine of Tales, it's going to be a no. But if anything, unless I'm going to make a bad art style category, which I'd put that in, we are still seeing, weirdly, no CG 3D model, more Western style adult games. Today we've seen about 3. Alright, so finally we find a more Western CG 3D art style in Neon Knights 2, which there is something weird, I think, about a lot of these 3D CG games, in that they always seem to be at least one tier less in quality than the flatter ones, and that's probably just because they're spending more money and resources to do the 3D. Neon Knights 2 seems to be a collection of dick girls, and maybe some leather and cop fetish. And there's the dick girls here have incredibly large members. And yeah, every screenshot here is just incredibly pornographic. Neon Knights 2 is selling for $8.49. It says it supports English, German, Spain, Spanish, and simplified Chinese. So that is, I guess, one in the 3D CGI category as far as adult games. It's fairly consistent, and I think it is still very worth pointing out that this is some kind of multiplayer game, so I'm going to say no to it. Some kind of like racing multiplayer game. Whole group of people racing at the same time. Yep, same game again. Definitely am getting duplicate tabs. It's surprising how many of these games come out and how many of them are just not known to come out. Like at one level, if you don't like those kinds of games, or if you just don't like adult games, you should probably know how many are being made and not potentially just make an assumption that there is a ton of them being made, because there really isn't. Like you get 4 or 5 games, like adult games, a week, compared to hundreds upon hundreds of other kinds of non-adult games coming out on Steam on the week. So knowing the percentage and knowing the reality of the situation is more informed. If you don't like them, it's more informed if you do like them. You get games like this, Five Nights at Furry's, which is tagged as having sexual content, but you can tell looks like absolute garbage and really is a joke game more than anything, in which you've taken Five Nights at Freddy's and parried it so that you have furry showing off cleavage, and very possibly that is all you're seeing or that's being shown off. $2.39 English, allegedly full audio. And it's murder themes and girls in lingerie is really as far as it goes, and that's why this game isn't actually in the adult section. Although, depending on what your own personal opinion is, and maybe a game like this should be in the adult section. Maybe the adult section would make a lot more sense if it wasn't always the most hardcore, most extreme games. If something like God of War Ragnarok got put in the adult section, and that led to a lot more people checking out the adult section of the Steam storefront, that might be a good thing. But it probably wouldn't be. And it's not something I think Valve and Steam wants to do. Keep Me Posted is a mail delivery game. There's actually quite a few of these on Steam, but I'll give it a follow. Save the Queen. Looks like it's an RPG Maker type game of no real interest. But yeah, I think in general, if more people knew the quality and the number of adult games, then there's the beginning from that a conversation as far as, hey, these should be better, or there should just be fewer of them, one way or the other. Because right now, the slapdash nature of them, I think, is pretty bad. I don't know if this is really a game you'd want to play where you're playing as a character who's drunk trying to avoid obstacles. and not fall over, but it is kind of a funny concept, being stumbling drunk through an obstacle course. On the other hand, it's very possible that that it is just a bad game that has poor controls, and they're trying to make an excuse for that. This Cyber Poly is obviously just trying to be a cyberpunk parody in low polygon depictions. Digit Factory. I don't know if I would love math enough to want to play something like this, but I'll give it a chance. Like, just trying to add and subtract seems like a little too little. Yeah, my level of engagement with math is, I like it in programming when you have a small like challenge and the formula might help you there, and you can learn about a new formula that you wouldn't know of if you weren't a mathematician. But I definitely like it in very moderated substances. I don't want, as a programmer, to do massive amounts of calculations or math, or just a lot of longhand addition, multiplication, subtraction. That would be antithetical to the nature of a programming language, really, as if you're doing the math by hand. And for the most part, I would say at least 60% of all the math done in programming is just increment a number by one or decrement a number by one, decrement. Just go up one, add one, subtract one. That's pretty much all you usually need to do. This is just a tower defense game, so we'll say no here. This, however, Furry Meow, is a match 2 furry game with, again, hardcore nudity, although it is individuals, and so maybe I should point that out. It's individual furry girls, cat girls. I suppose there is a slight difference between a cat girl and a furry in that all of the skin is covered in fur in a furry, where a cat girl is really just an anime girl with cat ears and maybe a tail. Although, in all fairness, looking at this nudity and not being particularly a furry, there is definitely a weirdness in how some of these furries are drawn, in that they have very much human mammaries, breasts, and human genitals, and then human hair sometimes too. So it is this weird amalgamation of neither being an actual animal, so you're not quite getting into bestiality porn, and not being an actual human, so there's this weird middle ground. Furry Meow is selling for 59 cents, which is a much more reasonable price for a match 2 card game that is just going to show you images of nude furry girls. Although, again, when you see an adult game like this, that the screenshots might be revealing everything anyways, so there might not be anything new to buy or see. So that would be another one in the weird category, or even the bad category if we merge that with like the Russian game. So we've seen 2 or 3 flat anime style adult games. We've seen 2 or 3 3D CGI adult games, and 2 or 3 weird games. I commissioned some bees. This game creator is creating far too many, far too fast. So it seems very balanced as far as the types of adult games that came out this week. That being said, it still does kind of feel like it is some level of bundling, that we're still seeing a lot more adult games this Friday evening than we saw between Monday and now. This next game is called Hypno Mama, which keep your bully's mom on speed dial, mind control that MILF to become your perfect lover. It is a flat, more anime style game, an anime mother MILF with giant breasts, hardcore screenshots. In a lot of ways, the polish on this looks pretty good, like far better than most. It's selling for $7.99. It says it's Japanese full audio and also supports English and Spanish and Chinese and some, let's see, well, several languages here. But I would question if it probably is a Japanese game. It's just kind of a niche one. What's interesting, I think, to point out here is looking at the description. It's large portions of the games include nudity and graphic descriptions of sexual activities. Characters engage in BDSM, including elements of domination, sexual accessories, bondage, and impact play. Impact play is a phrase that I don't think I've heard before. I assume that means hitting, slapping, spanking, things like that. Would be impact play. I couldn't imagine it means something else. Scenes of sexual intercourse involving pregnant characters as a special thing, and it contains mind control and brainwashing. This really comes off as the type of story that you would have seen in a hentai anime, adult anime. And if anything, I wouldn't be surprised if this exact story does end up in a hentai adult anime DVD OVA video. And that's really where a lot of those adult direct-to-DVD videos under hentai were coming from for many decades, but it's been quite a while since anything that was a visual novel jumped the screen to being a direct-to-video. In a funny way, Hypno Mama is the type of game I've been waiting to see being released on Steam in the adult section. Something that actually feels like they put real effort into it and that there is a level of quality here. I'm not going to say this is a masterpiece of a game or anything, almost certainly far from it, but it's a real desire to make a product that would actually appeal to the audience that is interested in that kind of product. Whereas everything else is these low effort visual novels or match 2 games or just garbage games in general. And that is definitely a game I would not have seen had I not toggled the adult only section. There is potentially an argument, and I'll stop talking about Hypno Mama in a second here, that because it is a MILF game too, it was easier for it to get approved. Because noticeably here, there is only one character, and it is the MILF character in the game. So you're not seeing any school outfits, Japanese schoolgirl outfit type things. You're not seeing any moe style characters that are shorter. You're not seeing any characters that possibly could be interpreted as being younger characters. Her being a MILF, at least looking at all the screenshots, seems to imply that if she does have a child, that child is probably not going to ever be shown and very possibly never even mentioned, more than he is a bully, and you're getting your revenge, which even that thought is a silly thought, that you can get revenge by bullying or hypnotizing the mother of your bully. And moving on, in sharp contrast to a fairly high quality adult game, we have here a asset flip garbage game, while my grandmother plays the piano. Looks like it's a walking simulator game. We haven't really seen a lot of walking simulator games lately, which is probably a good thing. The graphics potentially got better to the point where making a very pretty walking simulator game is no longer a sales point, and you actually have to have actual gameplay mechanics in your game and for it to actually sell once again. Here we have a GameDeveloper.com article. Activision Blizzard reportedly forced the union to pay for missed time of bargaining workers, which the forced word here is a little bit of yellow journalism, but it's not as inaccurate as it might be. Like, at a certain point, if you run a business and there is no union established, and all of a sudden, let's say, one employee out of 100 or two employees out of 100 say they want to go negotiate and try to bargain for a union, it doesn't really make a lot of sense on the business's side to say, we're going to pay for the time that these people are not doing their job and instead are bargaining for a union. Now, once a union is established, almost certainly all union activity is done on paid time. And that's just one of the things that is negotiated with a union in that original union contract. And certainly this is probably a little bit of union busting, but it's not the most egregious union busting anyways. There's plenty of unions that want to form and have to meet in secret locations off of work hours to form ideas and form bargaining committees and form those general ideas. And maybe there's some unfairness there. Maybe that is fair. I'll leave that to other people to form an opinion there. But yeah, it's early days as far as Activision Blizzard's trying to fight this union, and that's not things. GWA is claiming that Activision Blizzard outright refused most of the union's proposals for a collective bargaining agreement, which is not surprising either. Like, obviously they were going to refuse almost everything and outright refuse almost everything. There was a union negotiation where the company just straight up walked out of the room fairly quickly, and they just put a picture on Twitter showing, alright, here's 5 people that were trying to bargain, 5 of the employees, and everybody else just walking out. At a certain point, this really just kind of highlights the muddiness and the hard fight it really is to be unionized. The thing here is probably this generation of workers is not the generation that had to fight for unionization if you're in a union job, or is people who are in non-union jobs so they don't know anything about how hard it is to form a union. And so we're having to, potentially this generation of workers is having to relearn how anti-union businesses really are, and how manipulative and uncompromising businesses are, because people have just been naive to it. And yeah, at a certain point, as an outsider looking in, you really don't need the exact details, and you really don't need to cover this so much. Now, in all fairness, GameDeveloper.com probably is speaking to other game creators in the industry, so This is probably decent information as far as saying, yeah, this is how your business would act. Activision Blizzard is almost certainly not acting any different than any other business would act if you tried to form a union. And it is going to be a tough fight, and you're going to have to really push for it. And you may very well have to put a lot of effort and thought and working and miss time, as it were. Although it's weird that Activision Blizzard employees would be paid hourly anyways, but this is also for the QA workers, so they probably are getting paid hourly. Whereas if it was like the programmers who are probably being paid on the salary, this wouldn't have even been an issue. But yeah, it's going to be muddy. It's going to be dirty. There's a decent chance this union forms before Microsoft acquires Activision Blizzard, and then it'll be interesting to see what Microsoft does there, if they can do anything. There's, I think, some hope on Activision Blizzard's part and Microsoft's part that they can get the acquisition to go through before the union forms, and then the union process might be stymied because of that. There is definitely a possibility that whatever union gets formed at Raven Software just leads to Raven Software not being acquired by Microsoft. And then there's just a bunch of shell companies like Raven Software that Microsoft just spins off and doesn't acquire and doesn't care about. It could be a pretty bad thing, certainly, if Raven Software does form a union and then they have no intellectual property and no real funding to make a game ever again, and so then the whole company just falls apart and collapses, because then certainly anti-union people will say, well, that's the union's fault that this company failed, versus what the reality would potentially be, that Microsoft acquired like all the code and intellectual property and just left the employees with nothing to do, or no funding. But on the other hand, if a union gets formed and then Raven got left off as its own split off company, it might also very well just be the first domino to tumble to see more GWA employees, which were CWA employees before, the Communication Workers of America, now spinning off it with a new name, Game Workers Alliance. We may start to see more dominoes fall once these unions form and more companies becoming unionized. And if almost all video games companies were unionized, it might not make a big difference as far as the quality of games and to the end user, but it might make a huge difference to the programmers. Inherently, there is something I think that people are not thinking about. There is definitely a way in which the game industry became unionized, and that led to the management documenting a lot more unsatisfactory behavior, unsatisfactory quality of work in the game creators. It might lead to developers who are really well liked because they happen to be SJWs, or because they happen to tick a certain number of boxes of being like LGBTQ+, and all of a sudden those employees may get fired for actually being bad at their jobs, because once you have a union job, that's what they're going to really focus on. It's no longer going to be so much a boys club where they can keep their friends and fire people they don't like. It's going to be, you've got to find an actual metric here as far as how many lines of code you're writing, and how many like hours of work you're doing, and all of a sudden the SJWs who are spending half of their job, probably not really half, but spending a lot of their time in their job forming action committees to do SJW political things, may find themselves at the bottom of the rating systems. So a union may actually clean up the industry as far as the associate level employees as much as it might clean up the industry as far as the management level employees. Moving on, Google Play Games has a PC beta expanding to the United States, Mexico, and 6 other countries. Most territories and most users around the world can try Android games on Windows PC. I should probably investigate this a little bit more. Because at a certain point, it might make sense to just bring up Destiny Child and play that as my streaming game. But I think that would be pretty extreme too. Destiny Child is probably a little too lewd to be my main game that I'm jumping to when I'm trying to avoid not YouTube family friendly stuff. There's another GameDeveloper.com article here. New York City has passed a pay transparency law, which is starting to provide a glimpse at the game industry salaries. We now know what sort of wages companies operating in the region are offering developers. I don't know how many developers, as far as video game developers, are in New York. At a certain point, I question why a lot of people are in New York. But yeah, and maybe there's some developers are outside of New York City and like upstate New York that would be a little bit cheaper to do something like that. Rockstar Games listings in New York City. Axios found that a product lead of the company will be offered between $163,000 and $184,000, while an associate dialogue designer would earn between $50,000 and $57,000, and even that difference is far too high. It's hard to really justify somebody even getting paid 3 times as much as another person. When you have salaries like this, at the core of it, you're not saying you're almost never making the argument in the mind, or never justifiably making the argument in the mind that someone is 3 times as talented. What would make someone 3 times as talented or 3 times as capable? 8-year degree, 10-year degree, 12 years college degree? I don't think that makes people 3 times more efficient. I think there probably is a wide range as far as efficiency amongst people, but what you're effectively saying is this person is more indebted because of a degree, thus I have to pay them more. Or this person I value more as a human being 3 times, so I'm going to pay him 3 times this more. And at a certain level, that is what a salary is saying, is that I value this human being considerably less than I value this human being. And that's where concepts like universal basic income tries to address some of those ideas and say, well, at the very minimum, we value everybody at least a certain amount a month. And then obviously there's a lot of people, a lot of CEOs and C-suite level people who are overvalued as human beings when they are actually garbage human beings that don't really even do a lot of work for the company, and they think they do. Over at Epic Games, the company was offering to pay a senior product manager with Unreal Engine team between $187,000 and $242,000. There is a wide disparagement here too, as far as just somebody getting paid $50,000, $40,000 more, $60,000 more in the same position. Assumedly, if they have the same title, they're doing the same amount of work. While another listing for the operations manager for content policy and escalations came with a salary of $159,000 to $206,000. That's much more. It's still a very large gap, isn't it? Yeah. As far as the ranges, and all of these are like way overpaid, just because of New York and high real estate prices, which real estate really needs to be brought under control worldwide, but New York in particular. Ubisoft, meanwhile, is currently seeking a part-time game developer demo operator that pays $15 an hour plus overtime, and Activision is listing for a measurement lead role within its sales team that offers a salary range of $77,000 and $114,000. $15 an hour plus overtime puts you somewhere around $50,000 or $60,000. By the way, just to put a rough estimate on it, maybe I'm off on that. It could be up to $80,000. But that is kind of the apples and oranges also between salary and hourly, so the numbers are harder to figure out. If anything, I would say that's more of an insight into New York. So if you were to try to use any of these numbers as a justification as far as what you were paid, say in Texas or in some other flyover state in the United States as a game developer, they'd probably laugh in your face. And inherently, the idea of nobody wants to work anymore is really the idea that people finally have started to grow some backbones and actually demand reasonable pay, whereas for decades, debt and poverty has led to a lot of people being desperate, and they're just tired of being desperate and would rather just not work at all if the only people that will hire them are people that want to pay minimum wage for jobs that should definitely not be paying minimum wage. I'm not sure if any job should be paying minimum wage until minimum wage is a living wage. Like, if I was gonna try to apply to a minimum wage job, I kind of would like to be able to go straight up to the interviewer and say, all right, this is a minimum wage job, so we both know the deal here. I'm gonna screw up a lot. I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes, and it's gonna be a mess. But that's what you're paying for, is low quality, low skilled work. No skill, no experience. Don't expect anything more from me. I'm going to give you the bare minimum for minimum wage. That would be my sales pitch to an interviewer who wants to offer minimum wage, and I'd probably be escorted from the building at that point. But yeah, that is also the kind of the concept of silently quitting, doing just the bare minimum. I also saw a thing on Reddit where a lot of companies have forced people to go back to the office, and they've seen now productivity plunging, which is kind of surprising. Well, not really that surprising though. When you had people clearly say they don't want to go back to the office and they like the remote work and that it works for them, and then they're getting forced to come back to the office. Some people do like working in the office, but very few. Yeah, when you force them to do anything, don't be surprised that they're not going to be happy about it, and that they're not going to become better employees because of it. Moving on, NetEase Games has invested in a Swedish developer called Liquid Swords. Never heard of Liquid Swords. It's formed in 2020 by former Avalanche Studio founder and Just Cause director Christopher Sunderberg. So kind of cronyism, as it were. Hey, let's invest in somebody who worked in a company that was successful in the past instead of investing in new companies. We pretty much never hear of a brand new company with brand new people that have never worked in the industry getting invested in, or even announcing new companies, or assigning or getting any kind of investment or any kind of assistance. Like, if you're going to be a brand new company, you kind of have to pretend like you're an indie company where one person made the whole game and that you're a genius. And then once you have that first success, maybe then you can sell your company or go work for another company at a mid-tier management level or a high-level management level. It's definitely not the case of where you can just have a good business plan as a game company and go to a bank and get a business loan and succeed that way. Like, banks have been pretty much replaced with publishers as far as game development is concerned. And maybe that's a good thing, but it's probably not. It's probably a bad thing. Moving on, Hideo Kojima doesn't want a studio to be acquired, so quit asking. Every day I'm approached by offers all over the world to buy our studio. Again, this is probably an example of Hideo Kojima needing a secretary to look at all of his incoming communications, whether on Twitter or email or whatever. People should not really be able to get in contact directly with Hideo Kojima. And yeah, Hideo Kojima should be spending more of his time thinking about making games instead of running a podcast and looking at communications and Twitters. At a certain point, he is going to he is going to potentially ruin his own potential by just not focusing on making games enough, like, and being too slow. Video games, GameDeveloper.com. Next article says Twitter gaming social lead among the site's company-wide layoffs. The social media giant is in the process of laying off half of its global staff following Elon Musk's buyout of the company. There's something to be said in defense of the devil, if we can be the devil's advocate against Elon Musk, that a lot of these layoffs may be a lot more justified than it seems. Like, Elon Musk may very well be an idiot and firing far too many people, but if he ransacks the company and is the bad guy, and then somebody new gets in charge or buys the company and then hires back just the good employees at Twitter, it would be a lot more slimmer and a lot more profitable. Elon Musk seems to me to, again, advocate for the devil in his own incompetent way. He seems to be trying to make a company that is trying to actually be financially successful. Whereas Twitter, up until this point, hasn't really been about that. They've just been about acquiring users, and they've hit that saturation point a long time ago. And frankly, there's a lot of bots. Certainly. But when you have stories of one outgoing employee suspending Elon Musk's Twitter account on the way out, that shows that there was a lack of control and professionalism amongst these employees. There have been far too many stories to disbelieve them all of SJW and just irate employees stalking people, doing things they shouldn't be able to do on Twitter. The company is a mess, and a slash and burn way may not be the right way to do it, but it is a way to potentially fix Twitter. And as dumb as maybe $8 a month or $20 a month or whatever the number is for a blue check mark may sound to most people, it gets actual money in the coffers of Twitter, and it's not a terrible thought for businesses and people who really need to not be impersonated. Meanwhile, there are other aspects of Twitter that definitely need to be fixed, as Count Dankula, for instance, changed his name to Donald Trump and was able to cause a small stir because of that on Twitter, which you'd think that there would be a way of stopping that from happening, just impersonating Trump and tricking, I assume, at least some people into a lot of people thinking it really is a Trump posting. They also point out that it's possible that he's violated the 60 days advance notice that California has as part of the WARN Act of when somebody is going to be laid off. But though that almost certainly is small potatoes and is just something that they'll argue in arbitration. it would be surprising, certainly, if Twitter became amazingly great under Elon Musk, or if Elon Musk actually stuck with it. In a lot of ways, if we let Twitter die and then Tesla as a company, or the Starlink as a company, or SpaceX as a company become way better companies because Elon is just focused on Twitter and he has actual good employees working in those companies actually running the show, which is mostly how it's been described as how Tesla runs and the other companies run, is that it's mostly just engineers getting overworked like crazy. But yeah, if he ruins Twitter, and then Tesla, SpaceX, and Starlink become better companies because he's not spewing out his nonsense on those companies, that might be a better thing. And then, yeah, I guess it would be a miracle, certainly, is if he somehow did make Twitter a good company and stayed around long enough with Twitter to be the person that makes it a good company. Right now, he's the cleansing fire. The healing rain is the question mark as to whether there would be anything like that. And if Twitter dies, then people will move on to something else, I'm sure. What else? Who knows? Moving on, the U.S. Department of Justice has resumed a probe of the Activision Blizzard's esports leagues. Activision Blizzard's refusal to meet the Department of Justice request has resulted in a renewed investigation of the DO Justice antitrust probes. So Activision Blizzard is really screwing with the government or fighting with the government on several different aspects. Yeah. And I don't even know what the real story here is. Competitive balance tax made for the two leagues, which taxed esports teams whose players' wages exceeded $1.6 million as of 2020. For every dollar spent past that amount, the team affected would pay double the amount to the league, which would then distribute it to the teams that didn't exceed the wage limit. Interesting. That's an interesting antitrust probe or lawsuit, but I almost wonder if it's not a winning complaint, because I wouldn't be surprised if NFL or some other sports team has done a very similar thing where they've taxed people who have gone over the spending limit for their players to balance it out and have more balanced teams. Like, it doesn't sound like a terrible way to try and keep all of your esports teams balanced as far as their skill level and how much they're spending. In a lot of ways, it's also a little too late, because I don't know how many people really care about esports these days, or ever really cared about esports. I imagine little kids may still think esports is a thing, and there's definitely the esports fans that always existed think it's a thing, but the idea of giant convention halls of people going to see esports tournaments in an age of COVID is probably dead, and it very possibly never really existed in the first place and was just a fantasy more than a reality. Modern Warfare 2 composer Sarah Sagner departs, cites a difficult work environment, which is slightly different than citing artistic differences. I suppose there's a full... Can we get the full text here? Blah 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 blah. Well, we don't have any control how the music is presented in the game. What will be released on the soundtrack is not my artistic intent in regards to mixing and mastering. So it is artistic intent is a quote that's realistic to mine. Mike Dean was part of the creative vision for the album, as well as the mixer Frank Wolf. We have soundtrack masters in hand from Mike, which unfortunately you'll never get to hear. At the beginning here, I almost wondered if this was a complaint about the music being played in a particularly violent scene that they disagreed with. Yeah, it definitely, in this longer statement, does feel like it is just an artistic difference issue, which is nice to kind of hear about. Alright, so we're doing some follow list cleanup here. This prologue game, Yatsumi God Reunion. It's not a prologue, it says Reunion. I read that as prologue for some reason. Yeah, looks like a visual novel. Looks like a good visual novel. Full Japanese. Playable on the Steam Deck. Rated very positively, so obviously that can go on the follow list. I guess I could potentially make YouTube shorts based on games that are on my wish list or games that are on my follow list. Might be something to that. This looks like this is a VR game. Yes. Early access, still from 2020. At this point I say no. I'm gonna move it from the follow list. Yeah, sometime next week, more than likely we will hit a point where the this is probably gonna be a no, but I'll give it more time. Well, we'll hit a point where we're at the end of the follow list and I'll have to wrap around to the starting with the letter A games. A yoga game. I'll give it more time, but it's been nearly a year and not getting quite enough reviews. Say yes to that. Yamafuda Second Station. Mountain hiking card game. English and Japanese. Well, it's rated very positively, so I'll put that on the wish list. The problem though with making YouTube shorts around Yakuza Like a Dragon, obviously I'll make it to the wish list, around things that are on the wish list or around things that are on the follow list, is that they just don't have any real relevancy. I put all of these games on the follow list obviously because I just wanted to make sure they ran well on PC and were well received. Yeah, that doesn't inherently mean I would play all of the Yakuza series or any of the Yakuza series just because I'm putting them on the wish list. But yeah, I don't know if there really is a way to make something like that relevant. Like something on the follow list that's early access, I could certainly make a YouTube short saying, check out this upcoming game. That seems relevant. But something on the wish list that is just check out this old game then becomes fairly pushing it as far as any relevance there. This looks like this is just a all over the place asset flip game. So I'm gonna get rid of that. Alright, well, let's see if we have any new missions, and then we'll see the 9 new tweets that came out. Since we started so late, almost certainly there wasn't going to be any new news that came out this Friday. 6 days and that is gone. Let's go and skip this. We stopped playing right at the hour mark as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, but we did make a decent amount of progress just playing ranked, and I am happy to have that experience, certainly, because It definitely was getting annoying to not have any real success in the last month. Part of that certainly came around just having to focus in on the side festival. Right. Let me just quickly scroll down my Twitter feed and see if any of these new tweets have anything to do with anything video game related. I think the answer to that is no. Sorry, I went quiet there. Alright, so that's going to be it for this stream. As always, like, share, subscribe, comment on my videos because that helps me with YouTube. If you want a friend or follow me, there's a bunch of links to social medias down below, although at this point those links are getting fewer and fewer used. And then if you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.